Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Christina was busy in the kitchen, preparing for a family party. Everything was ready. The apartment was decorated. The table was almost completely set. Her daughter was sent to her grandmother. The only thing left was to take the chicken out of the oven and dress up herself and wait for her husband to come to celebrate the 10th anniversary of their life together, the pink anniversary. Also, such a wedding is called pewter, but Christina liked to call it pink. Tin that metal is soft, not durable, and they have with David everything is serious. That's why the room for the festive dinner was decorated in pink colors. The doorbell rang. Already? Did you forget your key? Or is he carrying so many presents that his hands are busy? My heart trembled with joy. Christina smiled brightly and hurried to the door, but when she opened it, she saw not David, but as if she were herself, but still unmarried. So similar to her seemed a young woman holding the hand of a boy of about 6 years old. "How do you do?" said the guest, confused. "Can I have David? Will he come soon? You see, I need him very much. That is, my son and my own. This is Ethan, his son." The story of Ethan and the betrayal committed by David began 7 years ago, when he was a young, hopeful doctor standing puzzled over the bedside of a young patient. No, her illness did not raise any particular questions or concerns, just minor injuries from a minor traffic accident, but her appearance. She looked so much like Christina, his wife, but not the Christina she was now, after the birth of his daughter Lisa, but the Christina he had first seen and fallen in love with how long ago? 5 years ago? How light, slender, impetuous she was then. But a difficult pregnancy, a difficult birth, all of that had done its work. Christina had changed, not for the worse, and certainly these changes had not killed his love, but still. Here he saw a girl who reminded him of that young Christina, and David continued his rounds, but that patient was still on his mind. No, there are similar people, but like that. He knew his wife had no sisters, not even cousins, and here they were almost like twins. When he had finished his rounds, he sat down at his desk and opened the medical history of the Nancy he had been interested in. Well, yes, no particular resemblance. Surnames and patronymics are different. Date of birth does not say anything. So just a coincidence, or a relative, but so distant that it doesn't matter? It happens. We lived in the same town, and it's a small world. Maybe some great-grandmother they have one, from Edak and strong genetics. Why not? What is strange is that the girl is interested in him, not in connection with the resemblance, but just interested, not as a patient. She is already confidently on the mend, which is not surprising. Youth and not with such traumas can cope easily. And not even as a girl who looks like a wife, but just as a girl of the type David has always liked. And then there's the fact that this Nancy was like taking him back to his youth. Christina, of course, is loved, familiar to the last line, and even the fact that she has gained these extra kilograms does not embarrass him in the slightest, so she even became nicer. But here comes the one whose brown hair has not yet known any chemistry. It is still as shiny, just as clogged with natural rings at the ends. The dark blue eyes are huge and look trustingly, hopefully, for happiness. The cares and anxieties of motherhood have not yet obscured their shine. The fat on the eyelids has not made them smaller, and the very features of the face are not distorted womanish puffiness. So it's the same Christina, only younger. So if his wife even found out about his interest in another, she would have nothing to be offended by. Especially since it's just an interest, nothing more. That's how it seemed at first, when he was going over the medical history. Then he suddenly caught himself wanting to see his patient, more and more often, and then not only to see her, but to talk to her. It turned out that Nancy did not mind socializing at all. David began to stay after his shift more and more often. He and Nancy would sit somewhere by the window or in a corner and talk. They couldn't get enough of each other. About what? They could hardly remember when they were apart. She went to her room. He went home to his wife, to his daughter. For some reason, Christina did not care much about his delays at work. She did not even demand explanations, because she believed her husband, or simply did not notice his absence. He himself did not feel any guilt. He did not do anything wrong. He was just talking to a girl who was attracted by the resemblance to his wife. But now it was time for Nancy to be discharged. David had just coincided, so that on the morning of her discharge, he finished his night duty. He didn't go home at once. He waited until the girl was about to leave the hospital. No one met her. Strangely enough, during all their conversations, he had learned almost nothing about her relatives, her family, her personal life in general. Nancy didn't like to talk about it, and David didn't insist. They left the hospital together. David offered the girl a ride home, she agreed. They drove up to the house. Nancy was in no hurry to get out. Apparently, they were both not at all happy that the acquaintance might end there. "Well, Nancy, I am very glad that you have recovered and hope that nothing more bad happens to you. The only sad thing is that we won't be in touch now. I'm so used to our conversations. It's rare to have such a heart-to-heart talk with someone," David said with a smile. "But why don't we keep chatting? After all, we are not numb." Nancy smiled back. "Will you come to my place after duty? We'll have tea." "With pleasure." The man exclaimed, feeling a hint in this invitation, and was not mistaken. This morning they became close. David himself was amazed that so easily and thoughtlessly cheated on his wife, that he gave himself to the new feeling with such delight. He, tired after the experience, dozed off on his mistress's shoulder, and woke up only after a couple of hours. It was time to go home. He was already late. How would he look Christina in the eye now? He was deceiving Nancy and her, for the girl was probably hoping for some development in their relationship. Nancy knew, of course, that he was married, but David did not tell her about his private life either, and certainly did not say a word about the resemblance between the girl and his wife. How to get out of this situation now? The man thought, but everything turned out quite well. He warmly said goodbye to Nancy, returned home, and looking at his wife, suddenly realized that he had no remorse. It was as if he had been with Christina those few morning hours, with that past young, but his Christina. "What are you doing off duty so late?" "I was getting worried," asked the wife. "To be honest, I just fell asleep." David answered cheerfully. "It was a difficult night, not a moment of rest. I just collapsed in the residence room in the morning and fell asleep. But they didn't wake me up, or I wouldn't have made it home. I fell asleep at the wheel." He himself was surprised how easily and casually he lied, how he kissed his wife, rubbed her head. His daughter ran out to him. Everything was as usual, as if he had not been a few hours ago in the arms of another woman. "I guess that's because everything's okay. I didn't do anything wrong. It was an accident and probably won't happen again, except by accident." About the fact that this episode was and would remain the only one, he was lying to himself already. He was attracted to Nancy. He realized that their meetings would continue. And David did become a frequent visitor to the small apartment that Nancy rented, where she lived alone. This love nest became for him that quiet harbor in which he continued to live his youth. As it happened, their romance with Christina was very precocious. They first fell in love with each other, and only then met, and by the time they met they already knew that they could not live without each other, so they did not delay with the proposal and wedding. And Lisa appeared less than a year after the wedding. What was there to wait for? They love each other, they are happy, and therefore the child was desired and loved. But after her birth, the daughter became the main person in the life of Christina and David himself, and his own feelings, worries, and desires went to the background. Outwardly, Christina changed so much that those who knew her before marriage, and then a few years did not see, did not even recognize. David always believed that to discuss the appearance of a woman, it is the last thing, so never commented, nor extra pounds or other changes in his wife. She was still his favorite Christina. Yes, he saw her every day and did not notice much change, but added a little weight and what? But even a lot of weight gain, but not to the point of ugliness, not to serious health problems. She feels comfortable in her weight, with this funny old lady chemistry on her head, without makeup, in comfortable shoes, low heels, in cozy sweaters and pants on the elastic band, and very well, and he is good. Christina herself has become so cozy, homely, you can immediately see that she is an ideal housewife, wife, and mother. And what else does a man need for happiness? It turned out something is needed, and he realized it with the appearance of this girl. But she's not Christina. Yes, they're alike, but they're different, and they're different. Even if Nancy was a clone of his Christina, he wouldn't have left his wife. He loved her and his daughter too. Besides, he knew Christina's character. If she found out about the affair, everything would be over. She wouldn't understand and wouldn't forgive, and Nancy? After all, this girl became a dear person, and without her the world of David would be impoverished. Is his behavior fair to her? Yes, she doesn't allow herself any hints or demands, but she's probably hoping he'll make some kind of decision. And she is so lonely, she has no relatives, and suddenly there will be a man who will sincerely love her and propose marriage? Yes, that would be a solution. I want her to be happy, David thought, and then he was afraid. But I don't want it to happen soon, because then how would I stay? Time passed, and David was not going to take any steps. He was quite satisfied with the way things were. But as time passed, Nancy began to talk to him on more distracted and unpleasant topics. David, why don't you ever talk about your wife? She asked him once during another date. Why should I talk about her? I don't think it's appropriate during meetings with you. The lover tensed up. Why not? From books, from movies, I know that married men often tell their mistress about how their wives are bitches or, on the contrary, weak, sick women who cannot leave. Well, it's with the implication that they can't divorce yet for whatever reason, and you're not even hinting at anything. Is our relationship completely hopeless? I don't know what to say to that. I'm afraid of losing you, it's true. But I don't know what's going to happen. So, if you have to explain, you don't have to explain, is that it? Coldly asked the girl, not like that. David drew her to him. I understand, Nancy, but give me a little time. That's why I haven't said anything yet, because I think about this situation all the time, and every day I realize more and more clearly that I have to make up my mind. That time they made up and parted as usual, but David returned home in a depressed mood. He wasn't going to decide anything, and that meant breaking up with Nancy, but he didn't want to. At home it turned out that Christina was beginning to suspect, if not guess, that something was amiss. Where have you been, David? Why so late? He was greeted by an irritated, agitated wife. I was where I always am, at work. What kind of question is that? Did something happen? Exactly what happened. My mom called. She wasn't feeling well. She wanted me to bring her medicine, and just to be with her, but I have to pick up Lisa from music, then do her homework, and she has to get up early tomorrow. She can't take her to her grandmother's, and you're not there as usual. I called you at work. They said you left a long time ago. And that was 3 hours ago. Do you have any explanation? Of course I do. What about Mom? How's it going? Mom's fine. I called Aunt Lucy. She had to go. Like my mom is some kind of orphan, she has no daughter, and a doctor's son-in-law. But you didn't answer my question. I had to urgently visit a patient. He was recently discharged, and suddenly his condition worsened. I could not go. I didn't know anything would happen to your mom. Yeah, that's life. That's my job, I'm sorry. But what am I supposed to think? You've been singing the same song lately. Work, work, work. No time. You're away from home all the time. You can't remember when you went out with your daughter or just socialized. You've been working for years, but it's never been like this for the last 3 months. Christina, I'm not standing still. I'm not going to stay until retirement as an ordinary doctor who prescribes oil and aspirin for all diseases. I am improving and successfully, and our future with you and Lisa depends on it, by the way. I do not understand the essence of your claims. Do you suspect me of something bad? This is news. We've never had anything like this in our relationship. It's easy not to suspect me when I'm always at home in the same robe. And me in a tuxedo at a social event. I'm always in the hospital in my bathrobe too, by the way. If you don't believe me, please embarrass yourself and me. Call that patient and have him tell you what time I arrived and what we did. David knew perfectly well that his wife wouldn't call anyone. And indeed, apparently, his tired and sad face made the right impression on Christina. She came over and hugged her husband. I'm sorry, I didn't think anything like that. Honestly, I was just worried. My mom called, complaining about my heart pressure. I should have gone to her sooner, but you weren't here, and I didn't warn you. I thought something had happened. You know how panicky I am. Get undressed, wash your hands, and sit down to dinner. David hugged his wife, pressed his face into her unkempt hair, breathed in the native smell, devoid of any perfume additives. My darling, my dearest. He thought, feeling the guilt of his wife squeezing his heart. What's Nancy? What am I upsetting my Christina for? Tomorrow they'll say that's enough, they've played, and that's all. There'll be nothing more. The moment he hugged Christina, he saw the familiar surroundings of home. Especially after Lisa came out of her room and hugged both parents at once, it seemed the only right decision. He was even relieved, but in the morning on the way to work, he doubted its correctness. What exactly is the problem? I love Christina when I'm at home with her, and when I'm with Nancy, I love her. I mean, it's not like that. I love Christina again, but the same old Christina. If Nancy wasn't so much like my wife, I wouldn't even pay attention to her. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell her soon that I love her, but I'm not gonna divorce her. And not because my wife is something wrong, but I just don't intend to, that's all. And the date should be shortened somehow, or what? So he thought on the way to work, and then in the hospital, every now and then returned his thoughts to this question. After all, she was with him for a reason. She might take offense, she might even cry, but it would pass, and they would be together again. How long and in what capacity? That depends. They're not the only ones who live like this. A lot of people have been doing it for years. He also watches movies and reads books. He knows that it happens, and there is nothing terrible in it. This thought calmed David, who did not want to part with any of his women. And they, he was sure, didn't want to, which meant, well, Christina would live in happy ignorance like that, and Nancy would just live. What did she have to worry about? A lot of people even find some advantages to being mistresses, and she would eventually. She and Nancy didn't see each other every day, but several times a week worked out. David was not an oligarch, that's why he didn't give any fancy gifts to his mistress. He didn't have such an opportunity. He came, having something for tea, but on that decisive day, decided to be more generous. He bought an expensive bouquet of flowers, a cake, champagne. Nancy, opening the door and seeing him with all these relations, shone with restraint. Hope lit up in her eyes. "What's the occasion for such gifts?" she asked. When David, without saying the main words, began to help her set the table for tea. "Just? No occasion. Can I have a little holiday like this with the woman I love? Thank you, of course, but I thought you had made some decision." The girl answered bluntly. "And as for the decision, well, yes, you could say I have. I don't know how you react to it, but I hope it's not too bad." David got serious. "So, Nancy, here's the thing, I thought and realized that I can't leave my wife, not because she's something wrong, and not because I'd get in trouble, but I just can't, that's all. So this is a parting gift, a consolation gift?" She pointed to the table. The girl was visibly penetrated, as if the air had been let out of her. "Why on earth would you do that?" David exclaimed, this with somewhat false enthusiasm. "Why should we say goodbye and comfort each other? After all, we may well be together without all this." "All what? And together how?" "Running to me in your spare time, is that what you call being together?" Nancy's face has gone completely dark, but that's how we used to live. There doesn't seem to be anything awful about it, does there? Her cold, implacable tone confused the man. What's she doing all of a sudden, making a big deal out of it? And your wife, is she okay with it? She is satisfied with the fact that you will live with her and me? What does that have to do with my wife? Christina doesn't know anything, and I'd like it to stay that way. And my wishes don't count. Nancy smiled, and that smile gave hope. Your wishes are law. Everything but that. Well, that is, to formalize, to legalize our relationship. I love you, and... Okay, how about this? I want a car for Christmas. Valentine's Day, a diamond ring? March 8th, Canary Islands. Every date like this. She pointed her finger at the bed. I wanted to start at the swankiest restaurant. Is that gonna be the law too? I don't understand you today. We're talking about serious things, and you're making jokes. Yes, I can't give you such gifts. You know that very well. But we could go to a restaurant sometime, if you really want to. Yes, but on the other side of town, secretly, so that no one, God forbid, will notice, right? Yeah, well, I don't see anything wrong with it. A lot of people do it, and if you think about it, you'll realize it's not the worst option. I just don't see any other way, Nancy. Why not? There it is. The girl pointed to the door. However, if you want to go on with all this drudgery, then please, through your wife's consent. No, why? Why should she stay in the dark? Why should I deceive this probably good woman? Tell her the plan and bring me a note from her agreeing to this cohabitation. I don't know if you're making such a stupid joke or what. David shouted in a falsetto. Why am I joking? You could offer me such a thing, but why not her? Stay honest and honorable until the end. What are you looking at, David? Don't you realize how mean you're being to me and to your wife? No, I can see that you don't. Well, that's fine. Take your flowers and your gentleman's kit and get out of here. I don't want you to live like a sultan. I don't want to be the youngest wife. David was astonished. He didn't expect such an angry response. She would have screamed and cried and then consoled herself, but her. I tried to correct the situation somehow. But how could I? As a result, I still ended up with my kit on the stairs in front of the closed door. So I left the house with a bouquet, a cake, a bottle. Walked to the car, and it seemed like all the windows were looking at him and wondering. What's this? Nancy blowing off her own. What's she up to? It's all right, he's a man. Where's he gonna go with all this stuff? Take a wife like Nancy told him to say goodbye. No in this mood to come with cakes. Why not? Christina will definitely be happy. She likes sweets and champagne too. We can't throw them away. He calmed down as he drove up to the house. It is clear that Nancy, hearing such a proposal, was offended, especially since she expected something else. She thought that he would fall on his knee and give her a ring, but he did. Well, that's the zealous one. She'll calm down, move in, and everything will be fine. In a few days she herself will call to apologize, and he, understandably, will forgive. But time went on. Nancy did not call, and this quarrel was not forgotten. It was a thorn in the heart, and sometimes it tingled very badly. Was it really over? Would there be no more meetings, no more secret dates? Well, like this, he liked it. After a week, he couldn't stand it any longer, so he went, although he had no idea how to organize his behavior. Well, I guess it's up to him. She'll probably be happy. Why didn't she call? It was a character thing. He did not withstand the first. It will be very flattering to the girl. This time he arrived without bouquets, rang the bell at such a familiar door, expecting hurried footsteps, but the apartment was quiet. The bell, which he kept pressing, sounded somehow peculiarly, wistfully in the apparently empty apartment. The neighboring door opened in the apartment opposite, a rather young woman, in a bathrobe, kitchen apron with a bucket, everything as it should be. The bucket, empty almost, came out obviously to tell him, "Are you here to see Nancy? She's moved out. I don't know where she was renting. She's registered somewhere, I don't know, in the suburbs or something. She gave the landlady the keys yesterday and moved all her stuff out. And the neighbor with an independent look went to the garbage chute. We're proud girls, aren't we?" David had to turn around and go home. So much for love. At home, he lay down on the sofa, facing the wall, refused to eat dinner, referring to his indisposition. He probably had a cold. Lisa, who wanted to get her share of fatherly attention, sent her away. "Go on, daughter, talk to your mother." "I don't feel well." "Don't get infected." It was really bad somehow. It was hard. Could it be never again? Every now and then there was a pounding in his brain, and often after work his car, like an old clever horse, persistently drove not home, but there to the house where no one waited for him anymore. He stopped, put his head down on his clenched hands on the steering wheel. Could it be no more, never again? Then it passed. Let go, never, so never. What can you do? Even felt relieved after a while. Finally, no need to run somewhere, to take time away from my own, to fear exposure, to constantly feel guilty in front of everyone, to think about how it would all end. It all ended, a little sad, but that's just it, a little, just a little. And it's been 7 years since that story. Did David remember that affair? Yes, occasionally, and still with the same relief. Christina never learned anything. Everything ended safely and without loss for everyone. Here is already approaching the 10-year anniversary of their marriage, and this, I must tell you, is a serious date. It was decided to celebrate it together, without guests and unnecessary fuss, because it is only their holiday. Well, for friends, relatives can be celebrated on another day, and they will not be offended. Christina's mother congratulated them the day before, when they took Lisa to her, so that it would be just the two of them. Not so often they managed to stay really alone. David respected his mother-in-law, Margaret. A strong woman, alone without a husband, she raised her daughter from the age of 5 and raised her well. Christina has the fondest memories of her childhood, and Margaret herself was a young, beautiful woman. And Look How You Are did not become divided into all sorts of relationships, did not spoil her daughter's life, trying to arrange her personal life. One, it is something, but worth it. So she still lives alone, with a cat, of course, flowers, and a parrot, and as she assures herself, quite happy with her life. She never talked about the reasons for her divorce, not only with her son-in-law, but also with her daughter. David only once tried to gently hint when they discussed the upcoming wedding. He asked, "Is Christina the father? Would he be too?" Margaret had darkened then and cut him off. No. Well, what's there to ask? What was there to discuss if it was unpleasant? For the young, she never tried to ruin their lives with her meddling, but she helped as much as she could at the first request. And she considered sitting with Lisa to be not a favor, but on the contrary, a pleasure. But they themselves did not abuse the opportunity to get rid of their Lisa, except on occasions like tonight. David, looking forward to a wonderful evening, was choosing a bouquet. A gift for his wife was already stashed in the car. "Are you here to see Nancy? She's moved out. I don't know where she was renting. She's registered somewhere. I don't know, in the suburbs or something. She gave the landlady the keys yesterday and moved all her stuff out. And the neighbor with an independent look went to the garbage chute. We're proud girls, aren't we?" David had to turn around and go home. So much for love. At home he lay down on the sofa, facing the wall, refused to eat dinner, referring to his indisposition. He probably had a cold. Lisa, who wanted to get her share of fatherly attention, sent her away. "Go on, daughter, talk to your mother." "I don't feel well." "Don't get infected." "It was really bad somehow. It was hard. Could it be never again?" Every now and then there was a pounding in his brain, and often after work his car, like an old clever horse, persistently drove not home, but there to the house where no one waited for him any more. He stopped, put his head down on his clenched hands on the steering wheel. Could it be no more, never again? Then it passed. Let go, never, so never. What can you do? Even felt relieved after a while. Finally, no need to run somewhere, to take time away from my own, to fear exposure, to constantly feel guilty in front of everyone, to think about how it would all end. It all ended, a little sad, but that's just it, a little, just a little. And it's been 7 years since that story. Did David remember that affair? Yes, occasionally, and still with the same relief. Christina never learned anything. Everything ended safely and without loss for everyone. Here is already approaching the 10-year anniversary of their marriage, and this, I must tell you, is a serious date. It was decided to celebrate it together, without guests and unnecessary fuss, because it is only their holiday. Well, for friends, relatives can be celebrated on another day, and they will not be offended. Christina's mother congratulated them the day before, when they took Lisa to her, so that it would be just the two of them. Not so often they managed to stay really alone. David respected his mother-in-law, Margaret. A strong woman, alone without a husband, she raised her daughter from the age of 5 and raised her well. Christina has the fondest memories of her childhood, and Margaret herself was a young, beautiful woman. And Look How You Are did not become divided into all sorts of relationships, did not spoil her daughter's life, trying to arrange her personal life. One, it is something, but worth it. So she still lives alone, with a cat, of course, flowers, and a parrot, and as she assures herself, quite happy with her life. She never talked about the reasons for her divorce, not only with her son-in-law, but also with her daughter. David only once tried to gently hint when they discussed the upcoming wedding. He asked, "Is Christina the father? Would he be too?" Margaret had darkened then and cut him off. No. Well, what's there to ask? What was there to discuss if it was unpleasant? For the young, she never tried to ruin their lives with her meddling, but she helped as much as she could at the first request. And she considered sitting with Lisa to be not a favor, but on the contrary, a pleasure. But they themselves did not abuse the opportunity to get rid of their Lisa, except on occasions like tonight. David, looking forward to a wonderful evening, was choosing a bouquet. A gift for his wife was already stashed in the car. Christina was putting the finishing touches on the preparations for the party. David offered to go to a restaurant, but she only waved away. She did not like such trips. First of all, it was an unnecessary waste of money, and for what? What can compare with home food, cooked with love, and taking into account all the tastes of the beloved? And secondly, well, you cannot relax well. Around people, noise, music rattling, by evening you will get tired of it all, and then still go home. There was a third secret reason why Christina did not want to go out in public. She got fat. Well, yes, it's after the birth of her daughter, apparently, hormones there, and all that, because there is nothing to blame herself. She does not eat so much, and moves all day long is not lying around. But here are creeping kilograms from where that and takes. If the first 5 years of marriage could talk about a pleasant fullness, now no, for home, for shopping, for walks with her daughter, with her husband all normal, but for the restaurant was embarrassed herself. Besides, there were no outfits suitable for such outings. Not because there is no money, of course. There are no decent clothes for full women. Going to the store turns into another humiliation. Young, thin saleswomen look like a scarecrow, and to read their thoughts, mousings do not need to be. Everything is written on their faces. And why do these elephants come here? They should be at home in their hoodies. For today's evening, Christina prepared her banquet dress, bought 5 years ago, and only used a couple of times. She hadn't tried it on yet, but it was free. And the style wasn't so strict. It should fit. I stood in front of the mirror and tried to put it on. No, I managed to put it on only with my head, and then I couldn't. It was starting to crack at the seams. Yes, it's tight. I'm going to lose weight. We'll celebrate. We'll finish everything that we can't do today, and that's it. Kathy suggested some miracle diet. She has already lost 3 kilograms on it. I should copy it from her. And I won't eat a gram of extra, because I was slim once. She changed into a clean, and even flirty, but oversized robe. It'll do. It's a blessing that David loves her, no matter what. And then the doorbell rang. Christina wasn't prepared for that at all. Could it be a stupid joke, an elaborate taunt? What kind of son is her David? And if it had been an older boy, she would have understood. Little did the man have before they met. But this little boy, younger than their Lisa. So he was born when they were already married. Yeah, that's bullshit. Her husband had never cheated on her. And the woman stammered and said, "Don't think I'm asking for anything. Only what no one else can do, to save my son. I tried as much as I could to do it myself, but not everything is possible, even for a mother." Christina looked at her and understood nothing. The situation was saved by the appearance of David. He opened the door himself, not suspecting anything. With a cheerful smile and a big bouquet of scarlet roses, he entered the kitchen and was stunned to see both his wife and his former, almost forgotten lover. "You? only he could squeeze out, but that was enough. He realized that everything the woman said, so similar to her, was true. "I'm sorry, David. I realize I've made your life difficult by showing up, but you have to understand. Ethan and I have no way out, and your phone has changed, and no one at the hospital can tell us anything, and time is of the essence. Believe me, if it wasn't for your son's illness, you wouldn't know anything." "Well, you two talk about your own things. I'll go to my room." With unruly lips, Christina said. It wasn't that she wanted to leave the former lovers alone. She just didn't have the strength to be in the same room with them. There was no strength to wield the muscles of her face and her entire body. In the room, she sank into the chair without strength, hunched over, covered her face with her hands. That was all. All her ideas about her own life had turned out to be a lie. In the kitchen, meanwhile, a conversation was going on. "I've probably caused you trouble. Are you having some kind of holiday?" Nancy asked tiredly. "Yes, and yes. Why did you come? Who does that?" David was annoyed, frustrated. He wanted to run to the room, to calm Christina down. But here was Nancy, and this boy the son. Does he belong here, listening to this kind of talk? "Let's go to the room, boy. There's toys in there. You can look at them, okay? Mommy and me need to talk. The boy's name is Ethan. He's your son." Nancy threw them in the back. The child looked up at David with huge, surprised and slightly frightened eyes. "Sit here for a minute. We'll be quick." Going into the kitchen, David again attacked Nancy. "How could you? I don't understand. What were you trying to accomplish? This is the first time I've ever heard of you having a child with me. Why did you disappear and say nothing? I don't know what you're accusing me of. I didn't tell you, but how could I be sure you'd be interested? And I didn't know when we broke up. And I don't want anything from you. I'm telling you Ethan is sick. To make a long story short, he has leukemia. He needs a bone marrow transplant. There's nothing in the unrelated donor database that's a match, and probably never will be. I'm not a match either. They said to talk to my father, which I'm doing, but it seems in vain." Nancy spoke calmly, but her face grew darker and darker, the hope in her eyes melting away. How much younger is she than Christina? About 10 years? But now they looked the same age, but kind of opposites. Christina, the positive, Nancy, the negative. Thought David, with keen sympathy for both women. But why in vain? "There, you've ruined my life." "Oh, come on, I'm not saying no. Don't make a beast out of me. I agree, but I need to see the documents, history, diseases, tests, talk to the attending doctor. You still don't believe?" Nancy asked with annoyance. "I believe, but I'm a doctor, Nancy. How do you see it? Am I supposed to put it in a jar and give it to you now? This is a serious operation, and my faith is not going to make a difference." I agree. And don't cry, please." Noticing that tears glistened in Nancy's eyes, he exclaimed, "We'll meet at your hospital with your doctor and discuss everything. In the meantime, yes, I understand. Thank you, and I'm sorry. Do you want me to explain it to your wife myself?" "What's there to explain?" "Leave your phone number. We'll call tomorrow and figure out what to do next." David walked Nancy and Ethan to the door and stroked the boy's head. And that light touch somehow convinced him better than any test. Yes, this was his son. He, like many men, wanted to have a son, but Christina, exhausted from her first difficult pregnancy and labor, didn't want any more children. Right now, though, it wasn't this unexpected son he needed to think about, it was his family. He took a deep breath and entered the room where his wife was. At the sight of Christina, his heart clenched. So lonely, miserable, lost she looked, and it was aggravated by the fact that she was sitting in front of a table set for the holiday. Even the candles were in the candle holder, though not yet lit. "Christina?" David exclaimed. "I'm sorry you had to witness all this." "I'm not. At last I knew the truth. After many years and a whole life of that boy, and a part of my daughter's life." In a colorless voice, Christina replied, "I hope you're taking it all in stride. Let me tell you." David sat down on the chair. He felt that to approach his wife now was not appropriate, and it would be unpleasant. "No, spare me the details. I know roughly what happens between a man and a woman in order for a child to be born." The phrase might have been humorous, but there was not a shadow of a smile in her voice or on her face. She remained just as frozen. "Well, let's not stoop to vulgarity. That's not what I mean. I never made a big deal out of it. It was a casual affair. It wasn't even an affair. We met a few times and that was it. Then we broke up and didn't see each other for years. I didn't even know she had a baby. I swear," with my hands clasped to my chest, David assured me. "And you think that excuses you? That you betrayed not one woman with a child, but two?" Christina's voice seemed to revive, and although it didn't promise anything good, David found it necessary to start the explanation. "Where have I betrayed anyone? What are you talking about, Christina?" "It was Nancy who meant nothing to me, just as I meant nothing to her. I didn't know about the baby. And why did she briefly come to my attention?" "No, wait, I'll tell you." He lowered himself to the floor next to the chair in which his wife was sitting, wanted to take her hand, but Christina recoiled. "Okay, I won't touch you. You've probably noticed that this woman, Nancy, looks something like you. A lot like you. Don't you agree? I even think you're distant relatives, though you don't know it. It's possible, isn't it?" "I've noticed, but does it matter?" "Do not say that you mixed us up. It was already in some anecdote." The wife sighed. "And if she seemed even my own sister, what does it change, if only for the worse? Not mixed up, of course, just. Well, like falling in love with you again or something?" "Well, yeah, she was like another version of you to me." "Is that clear?" "No, it doesn't," Christina replied tiredly. "I do not suffer from schizophrenia. I exist in a single copy. One thing I don't understand is that you betrayed me and my daughter." "With what?" David shouted, banging on the arm of the chair. "It was 7 years ago, completely by accident. You wouldn't have known anything if it hadn't occurred to you. And who'll give me a guarantee that the next 7 years you've been faithful, that these won't come again and again?" "I will. Nothing more has happened, and nothing more will happen. How about from this day forward, you watch my every move, demanding accountability for every minute I'm gone?" He realized he was talking nonsense, but he couldn't think of any more acceptable way to save the relationship. "You still can't deny me the pleasure of turning me into the heroine of an anecdote. The fat wife watching her husband. Classic, huh? That's quite a role you've cast me in. I'm not gonna cheat on you, and I haven't cheated on you before." David was starting to get annoyed with this conversation. What does she really want? Not much happened a long time ago. Only the kids were coming from somewhere. "Okay, what about that boy, your son? Ethan's name, I think?" "Yeah, Ethan." "Well, I don't know anything yet. According to her, he's sick leukemia. He needs a bone marrow donor, and I'm his only option. If that's true, I'll take it, of course, but it won't affect our relationship." "Yeah, it's hard to affect it anymore. You know, David, I can't listen to your stupid explanations right now. I can't even see you right now. I'm sorry. I'm going to leave now. Where? Why? David was not so much frightened as indignant. Where could his wife go? Nowhere. She's just acting out, pretending to be resentful. He has to justify himself like a fool, apologize, lay on his feet. But for what? Where to? Not to his lover. I'll go to my mom. I can't look at you now. Christina, let's forget all this. Let's sit down at the table and celebrate our anniversary. You've prepared everything so beautifully, and so have I. Oh, the flowers are there. The water's still running. No, as it turns out, we'd have nothing to celebrate. Christina had apparently decided to be adamant to the end, and it was increasingly annoying her husband. Listen, darling, tell me straight out what you want me to do. Punch my head against the wall? Challenge myself to a duel? Give you a diamond ring? Christina sighed without answering. She started to pack some things into a travel bag. Ah, that's it. You have serious intentions. Are we fat but proud? Oh, David realized that it's not the right thing to say. He's trying to make up for his grief, but he couldn't help himself. He got carried away. Do you know why I reached for that Nancy? It was because she was almost exactly like you, only she hadn't turned into a fat, clumsy fatty, because she never had a headache, because she didn't smell of sweat, kitchen, laundry detergent. Yes, I wasn't going to leave her for good, but if she hadn't, like you are now, started to make a sacrifice of herself, maybe I'd still be living in 2 houses. And you had eyes and brains so fat that you wouldn't have noticed anything. You didn't care. Why? My husband comes home, brings my paycheck. We go grocery shopping together every weekend. The fridge is full. Eat your second 100 pounds. What's the big deal? Do you realize what you've become? I can't go out with you except to the supermarket for food. And she's not happy about it, for God's sake. Husband's got a thing for the young and slim. At the beginning of this hysterical, boorish speech, Christina froze, bent down and stood like that, as if beaten by stones, then began as silently to collect things, already the daughter too. Sharply catching the bag, she headed for the door, and only then David realized what he had done. Christina, I'm sorry. He rushed to his wife. I'm sorry, please. Believe me, I didn't think for a minute before I said just that. It was some kind of a fit, delirium, delusion. But Christina coldly dismissed him and walked out. Go on, you'll come crawling back. I'll see if I can take you back after this. He shouted shrilly through the closed door, hoping that his wife could still hear him. Christina, she did, but this last shout could not hurt more than what her husband had said before. Those words of his had killed her, crushed her, serving as the collapse of her entire past life. She didn't want to cry. There were no tears. They seemed to be frozen somewhere there, in the region of her heart. Only when she got into the cab and called her mother's address, she suddenly felt tears flowing from her eyes. David, having realized that his wife had left and was not going to return soon, went into the room, came to the festive table, and scooped something from the crystal salad bowl with a spoon. He didn't understand what he was eating. He couldn't taste it. He opened a bottle of champagne, poured it into a mug, drank it greedily, as if it were water. I felt a little relieved, though I was still nauseous. But it was necessary that I should get such stupid women, one or the other. Who asked Nancy to come to my house? She could have come to the hospital, and Christina. What did she care about? Isn't the fact that in 7 years she's never had a suspicion of my fidelity? Doesn't mean I only love her. Every man's got 100 stories like that in 10 years. You got her to the point where you said a hell of a lot of things to her, and now you're apologizing for it. She's gone to her mom's to cry on her shoulder. The fact that Christina had gone to Margaret was not in doubt, but it did raise some concerns. Mother-in-law was certainly a good woman and treated him perfectly, considering her daughter's choice very successful, but she was too principled. Her son-in-law knew nothing about the reasons for her divorce from Christina's father, but he seriously suspected that Margaret had not forgiven her husband for some affair. And now her daughter would come to her, complain of her husband's betrayal, and her mother will sing to her, something along the lines that you can't forgive, that once a traitor, always a traitor, and so on. After such a workup, try to get her back, especially if she will now, always with the mother-in-law to come. And in front of my daughter to arrange a showdown, the last thing I want to do. David thought with displeasure, not doubting that he would be able to get his wife back. But here, thanks to the mother-in-law's tweaks, it will be more difficult to do it. Besides, one must still think about Nancy and her son. Good boy, and yes, it's probably his son. He needs to be rescued, and he, David, is not going to deny the child help, but what happens next? Does Nancy have any thoughts of continuing the relationship in any way? To help his son financially, he agrees, but he is not ready for anything else. Still, it's great to have a son. It would be good to introduce them to Lisa. She'll be happy to know she has a little brother too. Except Christina wouldn't like that idea. Oh, okay. We have to tell her that the baby is a baby. He has to save him from a serious illness. I mean from death. And yes, he'll have to pay child support, but that's it. He has no intention of communicating with his son, and he has no intention of communicating with Nancy. He loves Christina, his wife, and he always will, no matter how fat she gets. Oh, my tongue! What did I say to Christina? Why didn't I just apologize, tell a lie, and then I just blurted it out? What woman would like that? Although maybe so it is better. Let her realize that, parting with me, forever alone will remain, hardly on her hunter will be found. With such thoughts he consoled himself, and gave himself hope that he might be reconciled with Christina, but there was no thought of Nancy. She might look better than his wife. But what did it matter? Christina was in a cab at the time, choking back tears. The cab driver, a young man, glanced at her in the rearview mirror, but remained silent. He had seen all sorts of things during his working hours, but this was strange, not to mention frightening. Well, sits, roaring fat aunt, nothing special. In any case, he cannot help, and comfort is not a master. Although, if it was a young and beautiful girl, he might have tried to find out what was wrong, asked if she needed help, but it was better not to get involved. Christina was glad of such delicacy. She certainly would not tell the cab driver about her troubles. She was not crying, but the tears were just rolling and rolling. There was no way to hold them back. She was sure that her relationship with David was over forever. She couldn't forgive what he'd done, let alone what he'd said in farewell. And it wasn't even the fact that she would now be alone forever that made her cry. Not even the memory of her husband's cruel words, "Lisa, that's what was upsetting in the first place, because the girl loves her father so much. And now what? She's not even 10 years old. How do you explain to a child why they won't live with her beloved daddy now? But how to live with a man who does not put her mother in anything? She had always thought they had a happy marriage, that her husband loved her, but she was just a fat, clumsy thing to him. Margaret, opening the door and seeing her daughter in tears, was horrified. "Christina, what's wrong? What's the matter with you?" she exclaimed. "It's all right, Mom." Christina tried to calm her down. "Has Lisa gone to bed yet?" "Yes, she's asleep." "Why were you crying?" "Hush, hush. I'll tell you everything." Mother and daughter sat down in the kitchen, covering the door so as not to wake the child. Christina began to tell the story. "It's okay, Mommy, it's okay. It's just that we're divorcing David, that's all. It's just business as usual. Are you crazy?" "But why? What's the reason?" "Everything was fine just now. I couldn't come to my senses, Margaret. I thought the same thing. I was preparing for the celebration of the anniversary. I thought, how well we will celebrate and imagine. That dress, in which I was on your 55, was not enough for me." Through tears, smiled Christina. "Don't lie. What does the dress have to do with it?" Mother waved away. "Everything has to do with it, but in general it turned out so. No sooner was I upset about the dress, but suddenly the bell rang. I opened the door, and there's a woman with a boy a little younger than our Lisa. David asks, he's the only one who can save my son. It's his child, too. Here's what she said. Oh my God, so could this be some kind of con artist? Was she asking for money or something? What does David say? That's the thing, he didn't say no. He came in just at that moment, with roses, like he was supposed to, a nice bouquet, and when he saw this madam, he turned pale, he recognized her. Christina covered her face with her hands and cried quietly. You poor girl. Margaret hugged her. Have you had to face such a despicable betrayal? That's not even the point, Mother. Christina exclaimed in a whisper. I might have swallowed that. Margaret, with an implacable look, shook her head. No, Mom, that's not what I mean. You see, this is a physical affair from years ago. Let's say I believe it was one time and accidental. The worst part isn't what he did, it's what he said. I can't forgive that under any circumstances. But cheating, then, you're ready to forgive. She pressed her lips together, Mother. That he lived with another woman and had a child with her. Do you still believe that children just appear after one meeting? He was living with two families, and you're telling me that's not the worst part. So you listen to me, Mommy. Christina moaned. I'm not talking about forgiving everything. I'm talking about what happened today. After that woman showed up and then left, the fun part started. I, of course, asked him what it was all about, and then he said that yes, he had a brief affair. But why? Because this woman, you see, reminded him of me. That is, the me I was before Lisa was born. That is, slim, young, and so on. And now I'm a fat, sluggish thing. I stink of sweat and kitchen stink. And nobody's going to want me like this for 100 years. Oh, God, Margaret whispered. Is history repeating itself? And is it so terrible? You have to believe in mysticism, jinxes, spoils, and so on. What are you talking about, Mom? What evil eye? What history? I don't know what you're talking about, but you know that woman really looks like me, like a sister. But I don't have a sister, do I? Of course you don't. I had a sister, and we're twins. Well, you remember, a baby picture, you saw it once? Christina remembered, yes. One day she found an old picture of her mother, a 5-year-old girl sitting on a couch next to the exact same girl. In response to Christina's question, the mother replied that yes, she had a twin sister. So where is she now? Asked Christina, then also a child. She's gone now. Margaret replied in a low voice, and from her darkened face, her daughter realized that further questioning was useless. She went on to make up her own story about this sister, who had died in early childhood of a serious illness. On the back of the photograph, Christina then saw the signature, Margaret and Doris, and the date. Thus, she recognized the name of her estranged aunt, Doris. And what about that sister, Mom? She asked, hoping that some mystery of the past and present was being revealed. and Margaret, embracing her daughter, began her sad tale. Yes, there were two sisters, Doris and Margaret. As it often happens with twins, they were almost indistinguishable in appearance, but very different in character. Margaret was serious, strict, neat, and excellent. Doris, active and restless, from a young age became a headache for parents and teachers at school. In childhood, the sisters were very friendly, but in adolescence somewhat distanced from each other, different interests, different campaigns. All of this prevented them from spending much time together. Besides, Doris liked to be the only one, and how can you do that when your twin is around? So we scattered to different companies. That is, I was not very companionable. I was more busy with my studies, not partying. And our Doris, by the time she was 20 years old, she had worn out all her parents' nerves, going out with one or the other. Everyone laughed at me, saying I was preparing to go to a nunnery. Then I met Ethan, the father of your future. David's son, also named Ethan. Christina put it in. And what did the father do with your sister? But not at once. Let me give birth to you, to live 5 years in the illusion of happiness. Margaret turned away, remembering those long-ago days, which had been so hard for her. She knew that her sister was jealous of her, that she thought everything was easy for Margaret, including the love of her parents, and not only her parents. Teachers praised Margaret. Peers could not start any games without Doris' cheerful, inventive, and fair sister. Doris herself, if she was accepted into the game, it was only because Margaret refused to start without her. After all, where Doris was, scandals and even fights often broke out. And when they grew up, there was a much more serious reason for envy. Doris, having become a bride, no longer tried to become a favorite of society with the help of her sister. She tried to win her own popularity, first of all with young people, and indeed often went out somewhere until late in the evening, and then spend the night out of the house, stopped shy. And how she liked to brag about which gentlemen were seeking her attention. To listen to Doris, so among her fans, almost cosmonauts, and the most famous artists were ready for the sake of her, Doris beautiful, and kill each other, and kill themselves, and wives with children to leave. True, no one saw these cavaliers, but there's no telling. And no one called Doris to marry, that is, according to her. They called her, begged her, and lay at her feet. But the bride herself was in no hurry to get married. And the fact that her sister had already been proposed to became for Doris a serious blow to the ego. Ha! What do you think? A simple factory worker, I would never marry such a man. She said scornfully when she learned that Ethan had proposed to Margaret. By this time Margaret herself had had enough of her sister's jokes about her being a nun, a homebody, an academic, and about not being able to look after herself. It's embarrassing, even if someone sees you coming out of the library with a bag of books and no makeup and thinks it's me. Then you can't justify yourself to decent people. Our resemblance is a curse. So when her sister began to tease Margaret about her fiancé, Margaret replied sharply, "You might go, but no one calls you. Not simple, not complicated." Doris, from such an angry rant, turned blotchy. "Yeah, I bet your Ethan will dump you at the drop of a hat. I wouldn't dream of arguing about such things. Let your famous artists and soccer players chase you, but for my fiancé, you're probably too classy." Yes, Margaret was sure of her Ethan. Soon they were married, moved into his apartment. The need to constantly see his sister, emanating bile, was no longer necessary. Of course they had to meet, and Margaret and her husband came to visit her parents, and they visited the young people, and Doris, who remained unmarried, was often in touch with them. They now lived in different parts of the city, far away from each other, but strangely enough, Margaret would often come across her sister when she left the house. "Are you coming to see us?" she asked Doris. "I need to. I have a lot of things to do." They waved her away. Margaret did not reproach herself for her self-confidence, for the confidence in her husband, but how would they live without mutual trust? Even assuming Doris had not forgotten that long-ago argument or had a real crush on her husband's sisters, what could Doris do? She would never demean herself to fight for the one she loved. What kind of love is it if she has to somehow wrestle her own husband away from his sister? What kind of family is it if you suspect your husband of having affairs with your sister? Especially since they soon had Christina, their beloved daughter, and how happy Ethan was, how he couldn't breathe on his princess. How could such a loving husband and father be suspected of infidelity? And how painful it was when it turned out that everything was a lie and betrayal. Even to her grown-up daughter, Margaret could not tell about what her father had once done. And now, apparently, the time has come, and in connection with this, already daughter tragedy. I don't know when or what exactly started between them. I was so busy with you, my family, which seemed happy, and then it turned out that your father not just cheated, but cheated regularly, that is, lived on 2 houses. That's what Doris told me, and then Ethan confirmed it. Christina suddenly remembered how she had stood at the door of her parents' room as a little girl and heard her mother crying and saying something angry to her father, and he mumbling guiltily in response. She didn't remember the words, and she probably couldn't understand them at the time. It was probably the very scene after which her father was gone. Margaret herself remembered the conversation, and it was clear from the way her still beautiful face was contorted by a twitch. "You lived with my sister, and now you're saying you're not so much to blame for what happened? I can imagine how you used to laugh when you met at me." "No, Doris, we didn't think we were laughing, and I didn't live with her. We just met, without much feeling on my part, anyway." "Why then?" "Why then? Was it a sport to deceive us both? You lived with me in secret, took advantage of my sister, and thought everything was fine. You're good, aren't you?" "Well, Doris, don't you realize I'm not the only one in your life anymore? You're so busy, Christina. You're so tired. No, do you hear what you're saying? You've been running to my sister for certain favors to keep me busy, and you think that's an acceptable explanation, that it's forgivable, that I'm going to throw myself on your neck with tears of gratitude and adoration. No, but I think I can still be understood." Confused, guiltily, Ethan said, I understand that you are a mean and unscrupulous man, and I'm not going to live with that. But Doris, as I understand it, doesn't mind at all, and I yield you to her. Don't say that, my dear. I never thought such a trifle could keep us apart. My sister is a trifle. My feelings are nothing. All right, Ethan, I can't have this conversation any more. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Will you at least think of your daughter? Christina is exactly what I'm thinking about. I don't want her living in an atmosphere of lies and betrayal. I won't let her learn to put up with that kind of attitude from an early age. You didn't just betray me, Ethan. You can't be a bit of a traitor. You betrayed our daughter by dating her aunt. There will be no more of you or Doris in our lives. And Margaret kept her word, filed for divorce, and no longer wanted, not only to meet with her ex-husband and sister, but did not even know anything about how they lived, whether they stayed together or separated. That's how it is, my daughter, and yet I didn't save you from the same fate. Wait, Mom. If this Doris, if she's your twin sister, then maybe David, Nancy is their daughter? Otherwise, how can you explain the resemblance? It makes sense. Twin mothers, same father. It's very possible. I have no idea how they lived after it happened, but does that change anything? Explains anything? How does that affect your decision? Have you decided what you're going to do next, by the way? I probably have. I don't want to live with a traitor either, and I don't want to see his mistress. Even if she's my sister by blood, it doesn't change anything. It's the first and hopefully the last time I've seen her. But Lisa, she's so attached to her father. How am I going to tell her that? Well, it's no problem at all. She's 9 years old. She should understand a lot of things. Yeah, you can tell her the whole truth. You're the one who was 5 years old after the divorce and missed your daddy too. How do you explain it to the little girl? Maybe it was my fault. You could have told her the whole story instead of just dismissing your constant, "Where's Daddy? When is he coming?" That was hard for me to hear. But then you told me everything, I remember. Yeah, I was about 10 years old, and then 2 years later, I heard he was killed by a car. You didn't even go to the funeral. I didn't even know about it. I mean, I heard about his death about a year later, I guess. And, I didn't feel much, really. It was sad, maybe, but that's about it. It's weird because I loved him so much until I found out about the affair. And then it was hard. At first he came to you, not me, but I saw him, the traitor. It's so hard, Mommy. I love David, too. I didn't know until this morning. Why did she come, that Nancy? Maybe it's a good thing she came to save you from having to go on with the traitor. After all, he betrayed you and your daughter. And the fact that it was years ago only complicates matters. It'd be okay if you'd been married for 20 years, tired of each other and all that. But then you're young, you're beautiful even now. But then, 5 or 7 years ago, he said I was fat, and that's why. Even if it wasn't cheating, just saying that, it was worth leaving him. You're fat and he's what? Apollo? Stop it, daughter. It's up to you, of course, but I don't even understand your doubts about it. Your husband cheated on you, insulted you, and you're wondering if you should stay with him. Margaret raised an eyebrow. No, of course not. I'm thinking about how I'm going to get over it. It's very hard for me, I'm sitting here now and thinking, how am I going to live without him? How did I live and live? What about the others? You don't think about that, but about how you would live, seeing every day a man who treated you so cruelly. Imagine, tomorrow either he will come here, or you will go there for things, documents, and he will chat you up, talk to you, kiss you in the end. And you will start to live on, a year, 2, 10 years, and you will know about what he thinks about you, how he justifies his cheating, and there will be many more. You can't be a bit of a traitor, remember that. Christina shook her head. You're right, Mom. I shouldn't give in to persuasion. And how do you know if there'll be persuasions? After all, he still has to meet with this Nancy, at least about the boy's treatment. And we don't know if the boy's sick. Maybe it was Nancy who jumped through unsuccessful marriages, did not succeed, and came back to David, hoping to get him in her net. And to do that, she thought it was a good idea to declare the child sick. But that's quite ungodly. Isn't it ungodly to sleep with a married man? Isn't it ungodly to go to his house for any purpose? To tell his wife from the doorstep that she was her husband's mistress, is that good? You can expect anything from such people. Did she discuss the illness and treatment of that poor baby in front of him? Yes, I thought it was strange, too. The kid's not a little kid anymore. Well, you see, this poor boy, I'm sure and more in his life, and seen and heard, but it's okay. You should not think about him, and about yourself and your daughter. In the meantime, Christina, go to bed. Imagine how happy Lisa will be to see her mom tomorrow. Christina went to bed, but she cried again. Again she lay in her former nursery. She was back, but now her daughter was sleeping next to her, and there was no hope for changes in her personal life. Mom is alone and not lost, and she, Christina, will not be lost. But I don't want Lisa to repeat their fate. Approximately the same thing said to her and her husband when the next day she resolutely told him of her desire to divorce and have no more dealings with him. Well, I see. Margaret had done her job. You're the only one who's ever cuckoo, so your daughter shouldn't be married. You'd think your daughter would grow up lonely in this environment. Think about what your son will grow up to be, and Lisa has someone to take care of her. Oh, for God's sake, if you think I'm going to be on my feet, don't worry. David, after a night of worrying, decided he wasn't going to beg his wife's forgiveness. There's nothing to apologize for, strictly speaking. Yeah, something happened 7 years ago, so what? Oh yes, he also did not hold back, said too much. Well, that happens. If Christina herself makes it clear that she is not ready for a constructive dialogue, then it can be discussed. Apologize and apologize. And if she sits with such a judicial face, then fine, she has already decided everything, not without the help of her mom. Let her live as a mom's daughter, she'll get bored, and then we can discuss the matter. That's what he told his wife. I do not intend to beg and apologize now, but if you do decide to return, I will always be waiting for you. I love you, Christina, and I always will. The wife, now almost ex-wife, could take it. And David really had a lot of troubles now. It was necessary to discuss with Ethan's doctor his condition to make a treatment plan. Then David himself had to undergo the necessary examinations. Bone marrow transplantation is not a quick and easy procedure, and then we can only pray that the boy will recover. And to establish paternity, he'll have 2 children. I mean, there's already 2, but they don't know it yet. He will introduce the brother and sister, and in any case they will have to meet. After seeing his wife off, who had packed her things and her papers, he called Nancy. It was time to start Ethan's treatment. They met at the hospital, where the boy was going to be admitted to prepare for surgery. David took the necessary tests there, and he and Nancy sat in the hallway, waiting for the doctor to tell them the results. I'm sorry, David. I must have gotten you in trouble. I hope you've made up with your wife. Nancy said timidly, We haven't quarreled. The man replied grimly. He wasn't going to tell his former mistress about the details of his private life. I'm very glad, but you understand, I had no other choice. I didn't know if you would agree. And without this transplant, Ethan had no chance. You have no idea how grateful I am. Why didn't you tell me about him before? I would never abandon my child. But I didn't know that. I thought you'd just apologize, send me away, that's all. I thought you said you loved your wife, and you weren't going to leave her. I'm not, but what's the baby got to do with it? 7 years later, you show up with this news. I'm telling you, I would never have shown up if it wasn't for this situation. I'm doing fine on my own. I don't need anyone. You didn't get married? David wasn't interested in that. He just asked so he wouldn't have to sit in silence. No, I mean I tried, but it didn't work out again. I loved you, you know, and maybe I still do. Don't talk about it. I loved you too, but that's in the past. Well, you showing up and spilling everything to my Christina was a bad memory. He was really angry with Nancy, and he wasn't going to hide it. She apparently decided to be frank, too, and I deliberately decided to let her know. Why should I be the one to suffer? Why should she get everything and I get nothing? Let her know that her happiness is not so cloudless. Resolutely, even angrily, said the woman. Well done. What can I say? That we also have a daughter, you did not think, of course. And your revelations could, and on her, reflected in a bad way. But she wasn't home, was she, I take it? Well, let's not talk about that. We have a baby to think about. Tell me about him, how he was born, how he grew up. Did he know he had a father? Or did you tell him I was an astronaut? No, he didn't ask me much. Though, you know, he's a clever boy, with an inquisitive mind, understanding a lot. Nancy became animated, starting to tell about her son, and David, under the murmur of her voice, thought about how he would have to build a relationship with his child now. You know then, when we left your apartment, he did ask, "Was that my dad? Are we going to live with him?" What could I say? I said that yes, Dad, but that we'll live the same way for now, and then we'll see what happens. I couldn't promise anything on your behalf. That's right. I can't make any promises myself. I'll pay alimony, of course, and I'll try to pay for the previous years. What about socializing? We'll wait a little longer. He needs to get back to normal. Even after a successful transplant, we can't say that he'll be healthy right away. A doctor came out to see them. He said reassuringly that David was a perfect match for Ethan, so they should get ready to collect the material. What about Ethan? Would he be healthy after the operation? Nancy was worried. I think so, but how fast will the recovery process go? The operation went well for both David and Ethan. The boy recovered quickly. The young body wanted to live, so it fought the disease with renewed vigor. And although fully cured boy can be considered only after 5 safely lived years, the prognosis of doctors were the most favorable. At the same time, David was busy with another process, divorce proceedings. He often visited his son in the hospital. During this time he got used to the boy, but still missed his daughter very much. Christina did not flatly forbid them to meet, but it was necessary to come to the house to the mother-in-law, and it was not so pleasant. Yes, and the girl, who apparently said too much, looked at her father judgmentally. Staying alone with her didn't work, and neither did Christina. Margaret apparently feared that he would pass out a goodbye and the daughter would not resist. Only after leaving the courtroom, after the divorce was finalized, did he manage to talk to his now ex-wife. Well, Christina, now your soul is satisfied, that is, your mother? Asked David. What does Mom have to do with it? With an uncomprehending look, asked Christina. You didn't betray her. You betrayed Lisa and me. You know very well that it's not true. I have never betrayed you, and I will always love you and my daughter. If your opinion changes, you only have to take a hint. Don't be ridiculous, David. That's never going to happen. You know, I think if you'd confessed back then, it would have been different, but it was too mean. But what's there to talk about now? It's just the way it is. And I confess I'm glad I didn't go along with you and multiply your lies. How's Ethan? He's recovering. Thank you. Good for you. I know you'll want him to meet his sister, but I don't think it's necessary right now. Maybe when they're older. Right now I mean Margaret, and I don't let her anywhere near me. She's running away, afraid I'll say something. He pointed at his ex-mother-in-law, walking quickly towards them from the bus stop. Well, have a good day. Don't forget that I'll always be glad to hear from you. He nodded to Margaret and hurried away. They couldn't talk any further. Christina did not want to, and her mother was always wary. You're a very cooperative woman, Christina. I don't want you to forgive him and suffer further. And Christina agreed with her mother, finding more and more advantages in this life without a man in the house. The daughter, seeing that her mother and grandmother were uncomfortable with reminders of David, also spoke of him less and less often, and even when they met she became more and more withdrawn. David did not give up hope that he would ever be able to reunite with his loved ones, but at the same time he realized that the likelihood of that was fading with each passing day. He had a conversation with Nancy that he could not call pleasant. He saw Ethan quite often, went for walks with him, and sometimes Nancy joined them. David did not tell her that he had separated from his wife. He answered her questions by saying that they were fine, but he had brought his son to his house a few times, and he had probably told his mom about his dad living alone. Neither his aunt nor his sister was there, and at another meeting Nancy bluntly asked, "So you separated from your wife after all?" Ethan says, "I don't think that's any of your business." The man interrupted her, "Yes, of course it is. It's just that Ethan would like to see his little sister, to get to know her, because it's a child's natural desire. He shouldn't have talked about sisters and aunts and things like that. They can't meet now. Lisa's mother doesn't think it's necessary. She never forgave you. Look, Nancy, I don't want to discuss this with you, now or ever. My relationship with Christina is none of your business, I'm sorry." "No, it's you I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interfere." But this conversation must have given Nancy some hope. Did she have such strong feelings for her ex-lover, or was she just tired of being alone? After all, she'd never really been able to get on with anyone. David, he loved her, and they had a child together, and now he was free. Just like she was, why couldn't they get together and become husband and wife? But David was cold and aloof when they met. He met his son with pleasure, but Nancy's presence clearly weighed him down. Realizing that he could not wait for decisive actions, the woman decided to take everything into her own hands. He is probably very much distressed about the separation from his wife and daughter, and probably feels guilty before me. After all, he left me so cold-bloodedly. I've been raising my son alone for so many years, I need to help him. Maybe he is happy to propose to me, but he does not dare, afraid of rejection, she thought, and during the next meeting she made up her mind. While Ethan was swinging on a swing on the playground, Nancy sat down beside him and put her hand on his shoulder. "Tell me, David, do you remember our past?" "Why? I mean, no, not really. But you loved me, didn't you?" Ethan was born of love, wasn't he? Her tone was almost belittling. "Well, of course it was love. Why would I be with you if I didn't love you?" David answered grudgingly. He did not like to say that he loved his Christina in her, and Nancy too. "Do you think we could get together again? I have loved you all these years, and I still do. I'll never have anyone else. Don't, Nancy." "David's gone. I won't have anyone else either, except Christina. Whether we split up or not doesn't matter. I love her, and you must understand that if you love her, we'll never be together." "Well, no, then no." Tears of resentment, of insulted dignity glistened in the woman's eyes. "So your wife left you. She won't let you see your daughter, so you cling to your son. So our son has to live like this." "Yes, I hope so. But it doesn't matter. I just don't like the sight of you flickering in front of my eyes like that. So Ethan and I will soon move to my hometown. There's nothing to keep me here, and I have parents there. Believe me, I'm not doing this out of spite. I just can't live alone anymore. Ethan, stop swinging. Let's go home." And so David lost his son. Soon he was seeing Nancy and Ethan off, consoling himself that they weren't going that far away. 3 hours by car, they could get there. He even thought that maybe he should have gotten back together with this woman, who no longer seemed so similar to his beloved, but there was still hope for reconciliation with Christina, and a few days later he bought a large bouquet of flowers and went to his ex-wife's apartment. In the apartment he was let in and desperate penitential speech listened to, but No, David, I have already gotten used to living without you and realized that I cannot forget neither what you did nor what you said. I'm not angry, I'm not resentful, but I remember everything, and you're unpleasant after all this time. Thanks for the flowers, but you can take them and give them to someone else. No, Will, let them stay. They're beautiful. Go away, David. Think about your future without me. David came home with nothing. The only woman he wanted to live with. He doesn't need him, and he doesn't need the others. Yes, he has a job. A lot of people need him, but it turns out that's not enough. Here came the weekend. He sits in an empty apartment and realizes that he made a mistake, which cannot be corrected, but he tried. He explained to Christina that he cannot live without her, repented, humiliated. And what? She can't forget some stupid affair of 7 years ago, some rude words that came out accidentally. He opened a bottle of vodka he'd bought on the way home. What could he do but drink alone? I'll get drunk, and I'll lose my job too, and to hell with it, because I don't want anything else, neither to work nor to beg for forgiveness. What a situation! I cannot meet with my daughter, because I love her mother too much, with my son, on the contrary, because I do not love. How can you get so confused? He thought, drinking alcohol shot after shot. David regretted those mistakes that led to such a result and realized that he could not fix anything.
Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Daniel pulled his heavy bag out of the dusty, smelly bus. He saw himself, his old bag, and the entire interior of the gasoline and hot dust-stained bus as dirty, wrinkled, and in need of immediate washing. The steps of the old bus were spattered with seed husks and small scraps of paper. Daniel slid his bag down them, kicked it squeamishly into the thick side, shaking it off automatically, and wiped away the sweat. What a heat wave this year! The passengers on the bus were drenched in sweat, but at least there was some breeze blowing through the open hatch, though the smell of gasoline booze was unbearable, and gusts of wind cooled people's faces. And here, in the middle of a huge field, where only a lonely sign stood, there was nothing to breathe. The heat is standing, in the face carries the hot smell of the field, on which some places are already becoming obvious splotches, so burned out grass under the scorching sun. And the yellowing grass and pathetic bushes on the roadside looked almost as uncomfortable and unkempt as the bus that had just left, hiding in the clouds of dust. Here it was his native side, such a familiar and yet forgotten place. What a sin to say! It looked rather shabby, his native village, there on the hill, and it was still 1.5 kilometers to carry the bag to it. He wanted to get here as soon as possible. After all the things he had seen in the past few years, Daniel was not interested in this landscape, or the village streets, which stretched from top to bottom and were clearly visible from here. He was a practical man. Rather than reminisce about unfulfilled dreams, he should think better of where to stay. He didn't want to go straight to Lucy's house. Daniel followed the path that led to the center of the village. His second cousin lived there. They hadn't seen each other for 10 years, if not more, and there wasn't much friendship. But his sister might let him stay there. It was good that Abigail didn't like his ex-wife Lucy, so maybe it would work out. Daniel recognized the old woman who was coming toward him at once. A tall, heavy figure approached from across the street, leaning heavily on a stick and limping on both legs. There was no mistaking her for anyone else. It was their neighbor, the terror of the whole village, strict and fair Clara. Since she had worked all her life as the head of a dairy farm, She was used to giving orders to milkmaids and half-drunk cattlemen with a thunderous voice. She was also known for the fact that she was not afraid of any superiors, and she always told everyone in the eyes what she thought, and she thought in the collective farm way, in the owner's way, so that everything was fair. That's how she defined her attitude to life. She had no husband, so she lived on her own, taking other people's sorrows and troubles as her own. She was a true mother commander, masculine-looking, with a loud voice. On her feet, Mrs. Clara, she hadn't even changed. She was a flint. Daniel grinned to himself. "Oh, Baba Clara, great, not dead yet?" Cheerfully called the former neighbor. "Why should I die? The state owes me a pension for one more life." Granny Clara replied in a non-hospitable manner. "And whose are you, so cheerful? I don't recognize you. What are you doing, woman, Klaga?" "I'm Daniel, your neighbor. Lucy's husband? That's how it is. He's here, so he's here in the dust." It was obvious that Granny Clara was not happy to see me. She frowned, looked at the city's handsome man. "Well, yes, here he is. How long can one travel abroad? We have to get on with our life in our native country." Daniel tried to make the conversation positive, but the old woman had been known for her iron temper before, and over the years she must have hardened even more. It was not easy to get her to be cordial. "You could have gone on traveling and not come here. You have nothing to show off, and what about Lucy and the baby?" "Huh?" The grandmother waved her hand and even spat in his direction. "You should go back to your foreign land. You must have lived well there. For so many years you have never visited your native son. Shameless." She went on her way, muttering curses and curses under her breath. No matter how Daniel had prepared himself for the various options for his return, he wasn't ready for this. It was not pleasant, of course. Danher, the very first one, that woman Clara, she ruined his mood. Daniel had never gotten along with her before. She'd always looked at him like a wolf, even when they'd been living badly with Lucy. Lucy never complained or whined. Daniel knew that for a fact. His wife was thin and weak-looking, but she had a lot of patience. I don't know why the old woman looked at him so unpleasantly. Yes, his homeland did not welcome him warmly. Daniel grunted and walked on, almost dragging his bag up the hill. The closer he got to his goal, the taller he grew, the more elastic his gait, and he carried his bag as if it were full of fluff. The man tried to look good. "Everything is fine with me, and my business is excellent, and my mood is good. You see, I'm in a great mood." His whole look screamed. The wide smile he had on his face looked like the mask of a happy man. The street he was walking down after years of absence appeared narrower, more unassuming than when he was a child. But through the front gardens, tall golden orbs and mallows were also going crazy. These unpretentious flowers were familiar attributes of his native village from childhood, and Daniel felt something stirring in his soul. The front garden of his native house had looked exactly the same when he went to school for the first time as a 7-year-old boy, and it was exactly the same bouquet of golden orbs that he had held in his skinny hands, shyly holding out to the beautiful and slender teacher. Is the teacher, whom the 13 first graders adored with all their hearts, still alive? They caught her every word, and at recess they tried to come as close as possible to her desk to breathe in the wonderful smell of her hair. They smelled of divine toilet soap. For the village kids who washed themselves gray and thrifty, once a week on Bath Saturday, that smell embodied both the distant city, from which Evelyn came after the Institute and their own future, unclear but beautiful, like the young teacher herself. Daniel remembered his first A's, of which he had been so proud, his mischievous friends. He had always strived to be one of the best, not in studies, but in sports. If he failed in sports, he had to win in dancing or checkers. Evelyn left, and so the studies became uninteresting. The gym teacher who was in their school got married and stopped coming on a motorcycle from the district center. Daniel abandoned sports, checkers, but in checkers he could still now beat a dozen good opponents. But what good would that do? As quickly as he lost interest in everything, he burned out as soon as he achieved a little success. And so it happened with Lucy. While he was courting her, he tried hard, he tried his best, but as well as he could, as it was customary in their area. Lucy was considered to be almost the first beauty, and to win her meant for Daniel to win another victory. He tried. He walked with pleasure, remembering his younger years. He had lived well in his native village in his youth. What can I say? But then life did not go well, and Daniel was carried away somewhere, dreaming of a great future, temptations again. Here is the sister's house, Platbins painted blue and white, in the front garden according to custom flowers order. Abigail's parents always lived well and were excellent hosts, so Abigail is in them too, a real homeowner. Or maybe she's been married for a long time. Maybe she has kids. Well, blood is not water. Daniel will put up with Daniel for a while, and her sister's husband, and their kids. What can you do? Your kin, it said. Daniel stood up straight and opened the gate. You live well. He smiled broadly at the young, full woman standing on the porch. Receive your guest, sister. Abigail greeted him with a look of surprise or incredulity. This was someone she hadn't expected to see on her doorstep, hadn't expected, and hadn't wanted. Not at all. What brings you here, Daniel? She gave him her hand reluctantly as he came over to hug her. What are you doing here? Well, so native places, you have to build a life, the years go by. Again he repeated, as if justifying his arrival from somewhere taken, as if memorized phrase. But come in since you're here. Abigail did not look at him kindly either, but went forward, opening the door to the house for Daniel. The hut was as clean and bright as ever. Daniel remembered the comfort of Abigail's home. Everything was in good working order, nothing in need of repair, no ruin or helpless woman's hand. Daniel noticed that once, with that familiar rustic look. There was a portrait of Abigail with a handsome, curly-haired man hanging on the wall next to his parents' pictures. Who's that? Your man? Unceremoniously, he pointed him out to Abigail. Handsome. Have you lived here long? Is he at work? We live as long as we have to. The sister replied dryly. He's on shift for a month at a time. Daniel was a little upset about her unknown husband, but she kept her spirits down. Abigail, but I'll stay with you for the first time. Because, you know, there's no telling. He waved his hand somewhere uncertain. And what are you thinking of going to Lucy? Abigail shook her hands in amazement. I don't know, Daniel, but I'll tell you straight. You were mean to them. I wouldn't go near a man like that if he'd done that to me. Indignation was written all over the woman's face. She even turned away to the window, neither to eat nor to drink tea. She did not offer her brother. You'll live a couple of days, so be it. And there, I'm not your friend, and I'm not an advisor, you know. What you've done, no one is allowed to do. And Abigail looked her brother straight in the face. Abigail, but why you? Why did I have to ruin my life? Daniel sighed. The last thing he needed was a lecture from Abigail. Abigail laughed. So you've fallen out of favor and decided to be a husband and father again. Well, I am a husband and father, and what's past is past. I'm not a boy anymore. I've seen life. I've seen different people. I've traveled. I understand the value of real life, Abigail. Daniel was getting hot. He had not expected to take his sister's reproaches so seriously. You can't change the past now, and I have big plans. I even have a lot of good plans. I hear that Lucy is doing very well. Abigail grinned as she listened to Daniel's outpourings and couldn't help herself. Is that why you came back? Is the kitty licking the butter? Yeah. Right. Lucy's doing very well now, and she's cured Mason, and she's got a new house, and she's got a lot of suitors. So I think you're gonna have to suck it up. You don't know how much Lucy loved me, do you? Kissing my feet on the ground to keep me going. Of course she believed you, simple as that. She got married. She was going to live well. She gave birth to a son for you, you fool. Abigail wiped her eyes, remembering vividly her own worries about Lucy and Mason. Don't be so hard on me, sister. Daniel said peacefully. I'll stay with you for a few days and look around. You'll see how happy she'll be when she finds out I've decided to go back to them. Yeah, right? Abigail was outraged. You've been gone 10 years. What are you hoping for? Lucy, she's kind. Daniel smiled crookedly, convincing himself first. She'll be glad to see me. You're a fool to be happy with you. Abigail cut him off. You're mean, Daniel, really mean. No matter how you justify yourself, you're not a man. We'll figure it out. Daniel protested. I was not the last man there either. I worked at the construction site. Do you know how I worked? Ask anyone. I worked hard. No one had Abigail to ask about him, and there was no reason to. She knew perfectly well who she was dealing with, lying and deceiving himself as always. He seemed to talk himself into believing his own words. He protested and went back to persuading himself. You're Abigail. Remember, I'm a handyman. I can do anything if I want to. The main thing is to set a goal. If I have a goal, I'll achieve it. That's just the way I am. Daniel looked at his little sister and tried not to notice her judgmental, purely womanly, a little pitying look, and it was unclear whether Abigail actually felt a little sorry for him, or whether she was sorry that he was really her relative, a third cousin, a brother. And he again pretended to himself that he had not heard, but he had. He didn't believe his stupid sister. What did she know about people? People like him, purposeful, seeking, and what was his opinion? His sister sat him down at the table, cut lard, warmed soup, brought a table full of herbs from the garden. Daniel enjoyed plump cucumbers only from the bed, tomatoes cracking from their own juice, crisp onion stalks, and praised his sister. Well, Abigail, you're just like your mother. Aunt Nina was a famous vegetable gardener all her life. It was not for nothing that she worked in vegetable growing on the farm for so many years. Even my mom didn't have such tomatoes, even though Aunt Nina used to grow them. What a hostess you are! Abigail, indifferent to flattery, sat sadly. Her face never brightened. Don't they feed you like this in the cities? She did not lower her mocking tone. When I left, I had never eaten such lard and pickles. Shoeing, Daniel said nonchalantly, my native land, it's yielding. Little by little, my sister thawed. Daniel, you haven't found happiness in distant lands. She sighed contentedly. Lucy, your Lucy, she left too. Yes, she didn't settle down either. How did she leave? Where? Daniel choked and stared at Abigail, froze with a cucumber in one hand and a spoon in the other. Chew on that, or you'll choke on it. Abigail looked at him with annoyance. She came back later. There were all sorts of rumors, but nobody knows anything. You drove off with your tail between your legs, but Lucy was as if her soul had been taken out of her. She never left the house, never talked to anyone. She lived in lockdown, then she moved away. For 5 years, we didn't hear a word about her. We'd already forgotten her. But she came back. She came back 5 years later to your house and immediately started to build a new house on the plot. Daniel was silent, sitting there with a cucumber in his hand. A new house? He only asked in astonishment. That's it. She lives with Mason in the old one, and next to it she builds a big one, just like a palace. You can admire it. She hired builders from somewhere far away, not local. Ours would at least know something, but these swarthy ones don't even speak our language. Moldavians? They live right there, at Lucy's, in the anteroom. Is it really true that nobody knows anything? Daniel asked. No. People went crazy at first. Where were you all this time? Where did the money come from? How did you get it together? They tried to ask questions, but they wouldn't say anything. How is she? Doesn't she go out for bread? What does she feed the workers? She rarely goes to the local stores. She goes to the city. Despite her model-like appearance, Lucy was a quiet and modest girl. All the girls in the village were big, tall, and overweight, blood and milk. Noisy, vocal local girls could hurt the unwanted groom with a strong word and stand up for themselves, and if necessary, to scoff and hard to get their own way. Among them and the newcomer was like a sparrow in a flock of crows, small and not loud. Daniel wanted just such a bride, and it was not hard to choose. She was the only one to whom his heart lay. What do you see in that pale marshmallow? Mother grumbled. She can't milk a cow. She can't draw water. She's a weak girl. She's of no use in the farm. There's Doris. She has tits like a dairy cow and strength like a man. My father is in charge of the grain mill. That's why the house is full. If it's built that way, my brother is a forester. I'd marry her. I wouldn't be in trouble. But that girl, Why do I need Doris, Mom? Daniel laughed. We already have cows. I don't have to milk her. I need a wife, so I won't be ashamed to take her out. Not a horse. I'm not going to ride it. I'm going to live. How are you going to live with a city fashionista? She probably can't even melt a stove. She's got one too. Daniel didn't listen to his mother. He liked Lucy, and her gait was smooth. He looked at her 100 times when she walked past their house from the library, and gray eyes, so big that you can drown, also looked, what a sin to say. But Lucy herself went away quickly. You can't talk to her. You can't hug her like your girls. She was very strict, but he liked that she didn't let anyone near her. One look as if threw the guys away. If anyone dared to laugh, to press in a joke in a corner of the club, hapless suitors were embarrassed and withdrew quickly, until friends did not notice the failure and did not ridicule. Daniel had been looking for an approach to Lucy for a long time. He went to the library as if he were on duty. He flipped through a lot of magazines at a long table, tried to talk, but only the girl answered in one word, short and clear. Daniel gradually got used to the printed word, just not a fool, studied not worse than everyone else. He was also well regarded at school, and he turned out to be a good electrician. Again, not dirty work, not near cattle, for example. He wore clean clothes, was proud of his specialty. In any place people like him are needed. He used to read, and Lucy used to give him books. And you, Daniel, have you read about McCluco McClay? You're always looking at travel magazines. Maybe you'd like it? And she held out The Man from the Moon. I read it. We discussed the book. From that book, their friendship began. You to me, Lucy, beautiful, more similar find a book? He asked, smiling. You have a talent for librarianship. Immediately see into the root. understand who is interested in what, and continued to shower the girl with compliments. I must say, his praise was heartfelt. He really saw in Lucy only good, and Lucy, bookish soul, finally saw in him, as it seemed to her, an interesting interlocutor with whom you can talk. At first, as usual, the conversations revolved around the books they had read, and Daniel was sly, trying his best not to give away his uneducated nature, not giving the impression that he was hearing about many things for the first time. More on that later. What only they did not talk about, fall and winter evenings, in an empty reading room. To tell the truth, this library was not such a popular and crowded place. Gone were the days when half of the reading room was occupied by young guys who were happy to sit at newspapers and magazines until the start of the movie. Regular readers, really keen book lovers, went in the afternoon. Children from school were also brought in during school hours or right after school, and then the quiet hall was filled with children's hum. Printed editions on the tables were scattered in all directions under the children's quick hands. Children would come in whole classes, talking and laughing, and on such occasions Daniel would leave at once to return in the evening when Lucy had finished her work and was going home. It was especially good for Daniel to be here in bad weather. There were no people, no one walking in the rain or blizzard to the library. Outside the window of blizzard or rustling rain, you could hear someone slapping on the puddles, and the library was warm, the radiators crackling cozily, and he and Lucy just the two of them. He was enjoying himself and sinfully proud. The prettiest girl in their village, there she was right next to him. If you wanted to, you could take her hand, stroke her blonde hair, and most importantly, you could stare at her as long as you wanted and admire the major movements of her hands, watch her speak, watch her lips part in a smile. About the big gray eyes, he would have liked to write poems, but only could not. He felt it all deeply, as it seemed to him, in his heart, but he could not tell about it, even if he died. "Lucy, let's go to the movies. They brought a good movie today," he said once he made up his mind. I must say, while they were talking about books, Daniel could still explain himself, but when it became clear that it was necessary to somehow move forward in the relationship, again confused. "Let's go." Lucy agreed unexpectedly quickly. "I saw the poster. I really wanted to see it. I'll come closer to the beginning and we'll go together." The guy was happy. After that, he was already considered a legitimate escort according to village customs, and Lucy did not recognize anyone except Daniel and did not want to recognize him. She had already, as it turned out, become imperceptibly accustomed to him. "You guy, you're getting there." His mother scolded him angrily at home. "Look, you'll be tormented with her. You'll do everything yourself, mark my word. Then don't take offense at me. I warned you, we need a strong woman to take care of the house, not this doll with books. Mom, stop your whining." Daniel snapped languidly. "I'll get married anyway, you know me." They continued such angry quarrels until spring. Finally, at one opportune moment, Daniel made up his mind and asked Lucy, "Why don't you introduce me to your parents? You know all my parents, you know all the people in the village, and you have already recognized me." "What parents, Daniel?" Lucy was surprised. "I'm from the orphanage. I have no one in the world, no relatives, no one. I can only introduce you to the director of the orphanage. She is a wonderful woman. She was like a mother to us. I always write her letters." Deep down, Daniel was even happy. Lucky, God forbid. No one would prevent them from living as they wanted. No one would interfere in their lives. No one would command them. He had had enough of his own mother. "She teaches and teaches. She's exhausted. Mother surprisingly calmly perceived his decision to marry when she learned that the future daughter-in-law round orphan. "It's for the best," she said. "Ours will be ours our way, and she'll live her life." But Daniel immediately declared, "Well, no, we will live separately. With you will not boil the porridge. You with your moralizing will not give us peace. So, sorry. Goodbye. We'll come and help you. Just call us. But old and young should not live in the same house." "Wow, you raised a son," the mother wailed. "Why are we throwing you out on the street?" From time immemorial, a bride was brought to her mother and father's house. "I've made an agreement with the chairman. There's an empty house near the board. Remember? They'll give it to us for the first time, and we'll buy it back from the village. Well, it's a nice house. Mother has accepted it. Don't forget your mother. Do you hear me, son? Heaven in a shalash, and their shalash was good, in the center of the village, even to run to his mother, to fix the fence or wipe the floors. The library is close." The young lived for 3 years without grief and worries. They seemed to live amicably. There were no reasons for quarrels. What else? Unless they had a baby to complete their happiness. And that was the stumbling block. Lucy got pregnant. She walked with shining eyes and quietly rejoiced at the upcoming happiness. But it turned out that Daniel did not dream of a child at all. "Come on, Lucy. Let's live for ourselves. Why do we need a baby now? We're still young. What are you doing?" Lucy was amazed. "What do you mean? Why have a baby?" "It's the most important thing in life. It's the most important thing in life." "Yes, you'll have time to give birth 100 more times. Her husband is boiling. Now he's going to tie you up. Let's make a deal. You can go to the abortion. 5 minutes and you're free. Can you believe it?" "No, no way." Lucy cut me off. "I've never had a family. I want a complete family so that my son or daughter has a father and a mother, a grandmother, relatives to be. Unknown heredity, childhood in an orphanage, it's all taken its toll, of course." And she was so depressed for the whole 9 months she carried the baby. Lucy was having a hard time. The pregnancy was complicated. Lucy was hospitalized several times. Daniel became depressed. The usual way of life threatened to be disrupted. Instead of a measured, comfortable life in his own pleasure, he would have to listen to the crying of the baby all night, to do something for him, and Lucy would not be his at all. Already now, just on the threshold of the troubles, he suffered so much that no one will not show a little. He's not groomed, not fed. My wife used to hang his ironed underwear on a chair after the bath, down to his t-shirt and socks, and now he washed on Saturday in his mother's bathroom, so he could hardly find the right clothes in the closet. I couldn't find socks, so I had to wash the dirty ones myself and wait for them to dry. Of course, I went to my mother's house for lunch, not with different Mirandas, as Lucy spoiled him, but still home food, normal. He grew up on it, and nothing happened to him. But he wanted beautiful, healthy dishes for his stomach. Daniel was used to variety, but his mother's old woman had a menu. Soup and potatoes in 3 kinds, fried, boiled, and baked. He would have slept at his mother's, but she talked too much. Daniel was getting tired of the boredom of old age, as he called it. The house was boring, uncomfortable. There was no one to talk to. The floors were dirty. There was dust on the tables and shelves. The mistress had been in the maternity hospital for 2 weeks. Finally, gradually, he got used to the fact that he now had a son, but he could not love the boy. Strange thing is that Daniel had once loved Lucy, as he himself thought, for real. He wanted to be always with her, admired her beauty, even took care of his wife as he could, bought gifts, for example. Lucy with special love, put on a pink silk dress, which he brought her from the city. She remembered that summer day at the beginning of their life together. "Look what I ripped off for you at the department store," he shouted to his wife, who looked out the window when he rode up to the house with a friend on a motorcycle. "Even though I was on a business trip, I didn't forget about my beautiful wife. 100 women were looking at this dress, arguing, but I got it. And right on the street unfolded this dress of unprecedented beauty." Lucy just aghast and hugged her Daniel. He took care of the housing, and at first he arranged everything in the house. It is impossible to say that he was a bum or a drunkard. In the village he was considered a smart and not at all lazy electrician, and he often came to his mother's house to fix the roof or the fence. And when Mason was born, something changed in Daniel. Jealousy of his own son overpowered his love for his wife. It is true that Daniel was not particularly warm-hearted before. He had no friendship with anyone. He only told his wife that he was with friends. In fact, he was so busy with himself that he had no interest or time for others. Lucy noticed a motherly, unkind attitude towards people. He saw faults first of all, and then she saw her son. He was lying apart from the perfectly intact booths, where the frightened but seemingly healthy children were sitting. It was later learned that they were only slightly bruised. Only Mason was injured. He was taller than the other kids, and although the merry-go-round had not even had time to gain height and spin up, just started to rise, the boy flew out of the cabin, unable to hold on to the handrails. He was lying on the lawn a little farther away, with his eyes closed and no sign of life. "Son Mason!" Lucy rushed to the child, about to take him in her arms, but was stopped by the attendant. "Don't touch it, don't touch it. The doctor will come now. It's dangerous to lift him." Lucy understood nothing and stroked her son's cheek in horror. By the veins in his neck, she realized that the boy was alive while he was still alive. An ambulance pulled up. Lucy and Mason were taken to the hospital. Daniel, who approached, only had time to see Lucy get in with her son, and the car door slammed shut. Lucy, whose thoughts were occupied only with her son, did not think to wait or look for her husband. Time was golden. "What happened here?" Daniel rushed to the employees of the ride. "My son's in there. What's wrong with him? And my wife's in the ambulance. I saw her." "Calm down. He's alive." They were trying to calm him down. He let go of his hands and fell. "Your wife is unharmed. She went to the hospital with him." Once again, Daniel was alone. Mason regained consciousness, but his spine was damaged, and the boy could not get up or walk. Lucy was constantly with her son in the hospital. Daniel worked. The expenses were enormous. Lucy, completely dried up from worry, in one of the short visits home asked him, "Daniel, you'd better try to live more economically. We're going to need a lot of money. Reconstructive surgeries are expensive. Is there any hope that he will recover?" Daniel asked. "Maybe we're just kidding ourselves. The doctors are giving us a chance." It was obvious that Lucy herself had little faith in this, but she continued to fight for her son. Daniel tried. Money never hurts. He understood that well. He didn't like going to the hospital. He said he was tired at work. Lucy felt sorry for him. She was with the boy, let her husband rest. To look at the crippled child, the father could not and did not want. His estrangement from his son deepened. Again an empty house, again loneliness. He was tired, exhausted. There was no desire to go to his mother, tired of her grouchiness. The young man wanted warmth and comfort, a woman's care. When will it end? He was indignant when Lucy once again came to check the house and put in order, wash his clothes. "Well, I'm not at the resort." The wife was offended. Do you want you to go to the hospital and I'll go to work?" She knew perfectly well that this would never happen, that Daniel looked like a fool. To lose the only thing he had left, his freedom. No, he couldn't empathize with his bedridden child of 3 years. In that time, Daniel had acquired a convenient mistress. Miranda worked as a clerk at a bakery in a neighboring town, and a couple of times Daniel had stopped by the bakery for a snack and encountered her feminine, greedy gaze. He felt he had nothing to reproach himself for. God knows he tried. For 3 whole years he had endured loneliness, lack of comfort. Almost always alone without his wife, no one could stand it. How many times? He just turned 30, the age when you want to live. Now at every opportunity he went to Miranda, who always waited for him with a table set and pastels undone. And at home there's only work, money going to doctors and drugstores, a tired aging wife and a crippled son. More than once and more than twice, he tried to explain to Lucy that all this treatment is completely useless. Lucy, you understand, finally, if at once they could not do anything, then now you certainly will not be able to. Why are you wasting money? What are you saying, Daniel? He's our son. You have to grab every opportunity, you understand. Lucy was almost screaming. She, too, was on the verge, desperate. She came home from the hospital, hoping to get advice and support from her husband, but he looked indifferently away and mumbled, "I understand, but I don't understand why I have to work from morning till night, and I can't even buy new pants." Lucy was slightly taken aback. What is he talking about? She opened her closet and began to lay out a pile of his clothes in front of her husband. "Do you have nothing to wear? Aren't you afraid of God? I'm going to throw out all this old stuff." Daniel shouted, his nerves strained to the limit. "Are we a family or an infirmary? Am I married or not, after all? When are we going to have a normal life? We'll never live normally because you don't love your son." Shouted in his face Lucy, "You only care about yourself." The woman's heart had long ago cooled to this man, but by inertia, she continued to consider him a husband and bestowed all the signs of respect. What is there? She served him even now, when there was no longer any strength left. And when Daniel went to town a couple of days later, she was not surprised. "I'm going to visit my folks for a week," he said. "At least I'll get some rest." Lucy did not understand his action, but did not dissuade him from going. Something about her unknown kin flashed in her head, but she did not even pay attention to such trifles. What did they mean compared to what she and Mason were about to face? Daniel had already arrived at his perky barmaid's house in anticipation of the festivities. "Daniel," she cooed, "I finally have you. How long have I waited for you?" "Well, I'm not letting you go now." "Yeah, you won't." Daniel laughed, pleased with the warm welcome. "I'm a free bird. I love freedom. You can't bait me." "We'll see about that." Miranda purred, taking off his shirt and kissing him. "Maybe I will, or maybe you'll want to stay with me forever." "Oh, Miranda, you're a hot woman," Daniel whispered between kisses. "Do you want to deprive me of my last strength?" After a long lovemaking, supported by food and alcohol from the famous buffet, the luggers lazily discussed the situation. "Leave them alone. Hold Miranda. The child is an invalid. They used to put such children in an orphanage, and your clutch will never be young and beautiful, Daniel. What do you need her for? Look at me." She stood up on the bed, stretched her bare arms toward him, stroked her thighs and looked languidly at him, urging him to appreciate her feminine virtues. Wow, how appetizing. Daniel laughed and drew her back into bed. Everything he was used to was here, everything he needed for a comfortable existence. Daniel was leaning more and more towards the option that Miranda had suggested. "Okay, Miranda, I'll go there. I'll settle some things, and I'll be with you forever." "Oh, Daniel," Miranda shrieked and hugged him with renewed vigor. "How wonderful! You and I will go to a faraway place where no one will bother us." 2 weeks later, Daniel returned home. How miserable it seemed to him now, their home together with Lucy. He looked around. Nothing was dear to him. Nothing was nice. Of course, they had already paid the full amount for the house, along with his wife. So Daniel reasoned that he would leave the house to Mason and Lucy, and he owed them nothing more. That's it, he said to himself firmly. That's it. He'd been going to Miranda's house for a year. No children, no relatives, a nice place to live. Why shouldn't he live there? She's dusting him off, and then we'll see if Miranda's right. They should go to some big construction site. They're not hard workers, of course, but they want the money. Daniel prepared for the conversation carefully. He waited until Lucy and her son went to the hospital for another doctor's appointment. He went through his belongings and carefully put them in his bag. He also counted the money that Lucy had collected for her son's treatment and carefully put it in his pocket. After all, he was the one who earned it, so what should he do? To show up empty-handed at Miranda's as if he were a pauper and a beggar. He had everything ready when Lucy and Mason came back. Lucy looked at the suitcases right away. "Are you going somewhere? You just got here." "Yeah, Lucy, I'm leaving." Lucy was confused. "What do you mean you're leaving?" "Where?" "I'm leaving you completely." Daniel even turned away, as if he was afraid to look in her direction. "But I'm not alone. We have a family, a son." His wife looked perplexed, still not believing what was happening. "I can't live like this anymore. How long can I live like this?" Daniel atomized himself. I work, but no use." "What do you mean, no use?" "We have a house, a household. Here Mason healed. All the money I earn goes into a hole. No rest, no distractions, just work and hospitals. This is not the life I signed up for." Daniel began to grab the suitcases with shaking hands. He himself had not expected the farewell to be so difficult. Lucy, at last, began to realize that his scheme was quite serious. Looking at the suitcases at her feet, she said in a trembling voice, "And don't you feel sorry for your son?" Son, you've been with him since birth. But did it help him? All his life you pampered him, wiped his snot, and what happened?" Again, Daniel remembered what was so unpleasant to him, to make it easier to leave. "You were there for him then. Why didn't you save him? Why didn't you save him when he fell? Because of you, he became an invalid, a crippled son." Lucy couldn't take it anymore. "How can you say that about your child? You two went to drink beer." "No, to be near us then. How can you?" She finally burst into tears, which had been in her eyes since the beginning of the conversation. "I'm telling the truth. I pampered him, so he sits all day long. He'd be back on his feet by now if you hadn't dragged him to hospitals. There's no life. You say family. What kind of family are we? You're always going to doctors, and I'm alone. You work like hell, and you don't even have hot soup at home, let alone a family. How will we be without you, Daniel?" Wailed Lucy, who could not understand her feelings and only cried. "Will you go to work, Hal? Stop driving him back and forth. You can't get new legs. He'll sit alone. He's not a little boy." Finally, Daniel gave out all the things that had been driving him crazy for years. It was as if a long-standing boil had burst. "How could it be, Daniel?" Lucy asked through her tears. "The doctor said today that in 3 months we will be admitted to a clinic in the capital. This is already a 100% guarantee that the treatment will help. They work miracles there. It's the same story again. Lucy, how can you not get tired of believing these charlatans? I've been working for years for their money. Enough. But we've waited so long for this, it's only a matter of time before Mason gets back on its feet. You'll see. No, I've had enough. Daniel firmly threw away his wife's hands that were reaching for him. Daniel, for God's sake, don't leave us in our hour of need. I won't say a word later. I won't reproach you. But help us now. It's only 3 months. Lucy sobbed and threw herself on her knees at his feet. He only looked down at her squeamishly. Don't make a scene, Lucy. You're not the first. You're not the last. You'll have an even easier time without me, lonely one. And he let out a hoarse laugh. How many times can you believe this nonsense? The exhausted wife continued to cry, sprawled on the floor near his feet. There was the familiar squeak of wheels on the uneven boardwalk, and out of the corner of his eye Daniel saw Mason pull up in a wheelchair. Mom, don't. Let him go. Daniel yanked his leg out of Lucy's hands and stepped toward the threshold, stopping. I took the money there. I was the one earning it. That's why I took it. I have to start somewhere too. I'm leaving you the house. He stood there for a while, thought about it, decided to make a final threat. Don't file for alimony, or I'll sue you for half the house. Lucy sobbed with more despair, and he hurried out. I didn't want to hear her make a monster out of him. As I was closing the door, I turned around and met my eyes with my son. It wasn't a child's look. It was a look of disgust and hatred, a look that made Daniel uncomfortable. For the next 10 years, wandering through other people's apartments, lounging in other people's beds, he remembered Mason's deep eyes. All the happy moments of his life were poisoned by that look. Daniel returned in Abigail's downy feather beds. He was stuffy and heavy. Oh, life! He longed to return to his native village. He thought he'd finally find peace and serenity. But what happened? While I was remembering, I got so excited that I couldn't sleep at once. Lucy was alone with her troubles. There was only enough money in her purse for one trip to the store. Her mother-in-law, a complete stranger, had never helped her and Daniel's family in anything. She only taught them and demanded help from her son. Lucy recalled how on her grandson's birthday, the old woman sat at the table with tight lips. She ate the food with her daughter-in-law's pleasure, but never once praised the treats. As a gift to her grandson, she brought a 100-year-old yellowed piece of cloth. That's what kind of material used to be. It's unbelievable. 10 years in the trunk, and as if it was bought yesterday. On Lucy, you can make a shirt for your little boy. And with a proud look she gave the gift. Lucy couldn't remember any other gifts from her mother-in-law. Now that Daniel had left her and Mason to fend for themselves, the old woman was beginning to slander her daughter-in-law. What could she expect from an orphan? She's a promiscuous girl. She was like that when she was young, and they probably kicked her out of town to the country. Who would want her in town? Come on, you're lying, said the kind-hearted neighbor. She was a clever girl, beautiful, until they got into trouble. And your son left her with an invalid child. And he's an invalid because of his mother. How come? How do we know what she did to him? Maybe she's pregnant. What'd she do to keep from giving birth? Maybe he's not Daniel Mason. Oh, I think you're a witch, Betty. The neighbor used to say in her heart, you've been like that all your life, and you've gone completely mad in your old age. You are slandering your daughter-in-law, but she's a hard worker, Modest, and what a vegetable garden she has. Look. Cleanliness and order everywhere. What order is there? It was only Daniel who kept everything in order. The old woman was bent. Why don't you tell me how she used to come to your house and scrape out all the dirt? All the years she cleaned your house silly, she wanted to please you. I don't have a mother of my own, says Aunt Molly. It's not hard for me to help Mother Daniel. She's ill. But you're shameless, sitting there gossiping. Aren't you afraid of God? Betty has quarreled with her friends and is alone. Her daughter-in-law is now her first enemy. Her grandson doesn't go, and her favorite only son, the beauty and pride of his mother, has left. And that's it. The old woman became ill often, and then she collapsed. Lucy, no matter how kind her heart was, could not take care of her mother-in-law. She was left completely without means of subsistence, what to speak of the treatment of her son. Day and night, exhausted woman's brain was looking for a way out. What to do? How to earn at least a living? While it was summer, she and Mason saved the vegetable garden, lost weight, but did not starve. Lucy, can't you go to your place? Asked her Grandma Clara, worried about her neighbor. No way, Mrs. Claga. Who's going to let me? I don't even have sick leave. They can't keep me on sick leave for years. There's a good woman working there too. She has a family to feed too. So she probably has all the healthy foreheads in her family. Granny was angry, and she has a husband, and you're all alone. I'd sit with Mason while I'm still crawling, thank God. No, a library education wouldn't help, and it would be impossible to leave my son at home and sit in a half-empty library all day. Baba Clara, of course, is a human being, but you should see how hard she carries her soul disfigured by hard work. She has blood pressure, a bunch of other illnesses, and what kind of salary is a librarian? There's no more work in the village, a school and a nurse's station, neither of which suits her, and there are no vacancies. She can't go to the collective farm. The collective farm has ceased to exist. The world has changed. Life has become much more complicated over the years. Lucy is still only 28, and she feels like an old woman with only one joy, her son. He's growing up smart, reading, drawing. How much has he suffered in the hospital? But he hasn't lost his kindness. Soon it will be too small for him. Mom, why are you so sad? No, son, I'm fine. I'm just thinking. About what? I'm thinking about how we're going to live our lives. Mom, you'll figure it out. You're the smart one. And he reaches for his mother to hug and kiss him. Oh my God! Lucy prayed at night. Lord, show me the way to cure my son, to get him back on his feet. Help me, Lord. I'll do anything. I'll bear anything. Just give me a chance. Open the door for me. Blessed is he who believes. On a clear August afternoon, into the hands of Lucy, desperate to the last degree, the letter carrier handed a letter. From Margaret. Lucy gasped. Mommy, who is Margaret? Asked Mason. Oh, Mason, this is my very, very soulful friend. An orphan? Mason loved his mother's stories about her childhood. Yes, from an orphanage. Lucy hastily opened the letter and began to read. My dear friend, Margaret wrote, I'm writing to you from far away. How did I get here? It's a long story. I've been here for 3 years. I came for the money, but I think I'll stay here. You and I always dreamed of having a house, a bunch of kids, a family. So I decided to make that dream come true, to earn money to buy my own house. I didn't get an education. I knew I'd have to work wherever he put me. I was ready for anything, but I didn't think money would be so hard to come by. Yeah, the pay's pretty good here. If you live frugally, you can easily buy a house in this time. But I don't want a house anymore, Lucy. I don't want anything because I'm never gonna have a bunch of kids or a family. I met a nice guy, local. We got close. We were gonna get married. He worked as a foreman for loggers, and loggers here are mostly ex-convicts. It's a remote area, you know. They respected my Eric. I won't say anything bad about the laborers, but once two of them got drunk and started fighting, pulling out knives. Mine doesn't tolerate such things. At the workplace in the middle of the taiga, it's not allowed. So he went to break them up, even though they were angry mad. They didn't mean to. I believe they meant no harm. Yes, but one of them, in a fever, went right through my Eric's neck. How can you save him? I was pregnant at the time. Trouble doesn't come alone. I turned black with grief. I lost my little girl. The doctors said no more children. There's no reason for me to go to the big land now. Here at least I can visit Eric's grave, but there I have nothing. Lucy, my dear friend, you're all I have left. If you had only come to visit, I would have showered you with flowers, my friend. Lucy read the letter and tears rolled down her face. She remembered the sweet smile of Margaret, the red head, her laughter. She remembered her parents who had died in a car accident. For Lucy, she became a guide to the life beyond the gates. After all, Lucy herself knew nothing about normal families. Margaret recalled, Lucy felt with her a part of life before the accident, before the orphanage, before she taught Lucy to dream. Together, they made plans. Margaret's future was determined when a gymnastics coach noticed her. The training camps and practices began. She was prophesied a good sports future, but a minor injury prevented her from continuing gymnastics. It happens, one little thing changes the whole fate. It happened after the girls graduated from the orphanage. Margaret had to go to the factory because it had a dormitory. She regretfully said goodbye to her sports career. Lucy, by that time, had already finished her studies at the local library technical school, and after that she was sent to the village. In the beginning their correspondence was lively, then went everyday life, cares, and troubles. In difficult moments, Lucy always turned to her friend, of course, in her thoughts. And strangely enough, it helped her. She pictured Margaret's freckled face and asked her advice. The answer always came. And here was a letter from the only person Lucy could call a family member, a friend, a sister who would never let her down. A crazy thought arose in her head and began to take real shape, a plan for the future. All night long she had been putting everything in its place. In the morning, despite the sleepless night, Lucy got up cheerful and determined. The task ahead was even more difficult. It required an effort that even she had never had to make before. "Baba Clara, give me some advice," said she to a neighbor who had dropped in to visit Mason's pet, out of habit. Looking at her pale face, the neighbor realized that the matter was serious. Mason was sent to the yard to play with the kittens. There was nothing to burden the child with unnecessary talk. "Oh, you poor thing," sighed the old woman, having heard Lucy's account. "I would with great joy left my dove, my Mason, but how? We'll have to live apart. You and Sodes will not allow that you." Lucy looked at her grandmother with regret. "It's not easy, you need a lot of documents from them." "I'll give you money for the trip, Lucy, I will. I'll have money for the funeral, but I don't need it. Maybe I'll live to see you again. My parents were long-lived," smiled Baba Slaga. "I'll see you, Baba Slaga, I promise you. I'll pay you back the money from the first paycheck." She hugged her old friend and cried. "Why are you crying? You should be happy," grumbled the old woman. "You have such hope. That's what hope is. He will put you to work, support you for the first time, and Mason, suddenly, it will be good there with the doctors." At these words, Grandma Clara did not notice how she took out a huge handkerchief to hide her tears. She began to blow her nose noisily. Now the hardest thing is to explain to the child what and how. "Oh, it won't be easy, Lucy. I don't know how it will be solved, Baba Clara? Lucy sighed. It's all right. He's a boy, a sensible man, a kind soul like yours, and there's no one between you. You're the closest people to each other. You'll understand each other. And what about the house, Baba Clara? Lucy asked. It's not good for it to be empty. It's not good to sell it either. My son, it should not remain homeless, and I will not have time before the frost. And you, Lucy. Clara's on a roll. You go to the school principal first, and also to Benjamin, our former chairman. They are experienced people. They will help you. Every year some of the young people come to the village to work, and they'll settle them in your house. It's warm and the place is good. That would be very good, Mrs. Clara. I don't need money, just as long as the house is reviewed. And so it was agreed. The conversation with the son was difficult, but Mason accepted his mother's decision surprisingly calmly. Mason, do you want to walk like before? Mom asked. I do. Her son looked her straight in the eye. But we cannot go to the treatment. We have no money. Would you agree to wait until I earn money to live without me? At Granny Clara's? Mason smiled. No, honey. Granny Slogga wouldn't be allowed to take you, and she's not in good health. She can't take you to the hospital to town. She can't. Mason sighed. What if you stay at the boarding school where there are doctors? With the same kids for a while I earn money. There's tutors, different clubs, schools there too. Like in your orphanage? Mason raised his eyes to his mother. Like in my orphanage. Lucy nodded her head. And you'll make friends there. Mason spent almost 3 years in a center for children like him while his mother worked up north. Just as Lucy had been told earlier by the social worker, the internet was very good indeed. The social worker, an elderly woman, had been offering her the place for a long time. Realizing how hard it is for a single woman with a disabled child, you made the right decision, Lucy. She reassured her. There is a very good team of teachers. Doctors are attached to sick children. How long will it take to collect the documents? Lucy was worried about something else. No. This procedure has been worked out for a long time. You can't imagine how many parents of disabled children find themselves in a difficult life situation. That's why we process everything according to the data we have. The registration of Mason was quick. And now, they are already saying goodbye at the door of the local school, as the boarding school was called in the city. I'll sing you a song every night, just like at home, do you hear, Mason? Wherever I am. Now I'll get in a wagon and go far away. I'll go a long, long way. But every night when you go to bed, I'll sing for you. You listen and you'll hear it. And when will you come, Mama? Mason tried very hard not to cry. Son, I'll write to you every week. How much more money do you need to start walking? As soon as I get the money I need, I'll come right over. 2 hearts were torn apart. How do I get to her? How long is the train? How to dress so as not to get into trouble at this time of year? About all these things, Margaret wrote in her letter. Lucy didn't even bother to reply to her friend. Instead, she only sped up her actions. And so she was on her way to the unknown, for the first time in her life to a faraway place. Margaret could not meet her, unaware of her friend's decision. Lucy herself had to settle down in a gray town surrounded by mighty taiga bounties, the best earnings we have at the logging operations. Her traveling companion cheerfully told her, happily eating fried fish bought at the station. The work is hard, but don't go to the librarians. It's the same petty pay as in the big land, not even enough for clothes. I don't even have clothes that fit. Lucy was afraid. The woman laughed. Fool, so there in overalls and tools, all issued. Yes, such overalls. that nowhere else you will not find such warm good. A good-natured compartment neighbor explained a lot of things to the inexperienced girl, saying goodbye first. And you remembered my address, or what if you can't find your friend, where to at night? Look, that's where I live. If you ask for my name and surname, anyone will show you. And she showed me the street leading away from the station. And Lucy had to look for a new acquaintance in the dark night. While she was waiting for the bosses, while she was being registered for work, for the unknown position of a lopper, it got dark. What dormitory? The boss, a fat man of imposing proportions, was surprised. We only have a tent city here. Don't you see there are almost no real houses? You can count them on your fingers, but in the forest, yes, there is comfort. You'll live in a cozy wagon there, young lady. Let's get your overalls in the morning, and then we'll take a lumber truck to the place. Yes, don't worry, people live here too, not wolves. And he laughed loudly at his joke. Lucy returned back to the station, from where she went down the street indicated, to the place where there were real, according to the cheerful chief houses. The guest was received cheerfully, fed, put to bed. In the morning, sitting in the high cabin of the car, Lucy gazed into the faintly lightening distance. She was not a coward, but she did not feel heroic. Only ashamedly thought that yesterday she had missed the evening treatment. Before going to bed, closing her eyes, she had sung a song to her son to herself, but fatigue had plunged her into sleep earlier. So not without the help of new friends, Lucy began to work in the taiga. In her naivety, she thought to see her friend here on the first day. If only she knew how many 1,000 people were cutting wood and chopping off limbs, stacking huge logs on more loads. So far spread the lands of this timber farm that Margaret, she met only thanks to the word-of-mouth radio, through many fellow travelers, sending her greetings. All the more joyful was their meeting. "Come on, Lucy, I'll talk to you, so that you can be transferred to us," Margaret said. "Everyone knows me. I'll talk Charles into it." Charles was the name of the bulky boss who'd hired Lucy. "He'll fight, of course." Margaret smiled. "He'll say, 'You can drop your lady stuff,' but he can also transfer, he's Sutton. And Lucy is already used to her brigade." "No, Margaret," she answered. "My take care of me, do not laugh at me, patiently teach me everything, as I am now from them at once, only to a friend under the wing got. I'll stay at my place. Now we'll be near each other. I'll see you." The work was hard. The day was like another day. My hands fell off by evening. The frost dried my cheeks and tore my lungs. In summer, mosquitoes and nuss, the heavy, hot cedar spirit. People tried to take fewer days off so that they could work and go to the land sooner. Someone strived to earn money and chased the intended amount, but only few people succeeded. In 3 years of hard labor, Lucy had aged 10 years. Every once in a while, she looked in the mirror and was horrified. Would Mason recognize me? She wrote to him every week, received cute drawings, then letters from her son. In spite of her age and ailments, Grandma Clara visited her favorite boy at the boarding school several times. There was a bus to the city. That comforted Lucy a little. "I owe my whole life to Baba Slaga," she told her new colleagues. Especially she became close to an elderly woman, Camille, who arrived in place of the cook who had gone home. It would be more accurate to say that the old woman was very insistently asked to work. She had long been retired, agreed only out of respect for the past merits of the boss, if humanity can be considered a merit. She agreed, Camille, to replace the cook who had left for a while until someone new arrived. Her health had been compromised by years of living in these parts and hard work. Since she and Lucy lived in the same trailer, there was no end to their conversations. Camille was attractive in her modesty and simplicity, and could give good advice. She had lived in this area for many years. "How did you get here, Camille?" It was a question that excited Lucy very much. "I was a romantic girl," she told Lucy. "A gymnasium girl of the type who fell in love with a man to death, and he went to prison. He did time, and after his sentence, he was exiled here." "What did he put you in prison for?" Lucy asked. "Surely you couldn't love a thief or a murderer." "Don't be silly, child." Camille dismissed him. "He was a man of noble blood, a lawyer by education, from a fine family, father a professor, mother brought up children. She fulfilled the true purpose of a woman, mind you." "Oh my!" Lucy was surprised. "So what happened?" "Human meanness. My lover had a friend whom everyone knew and loved. Sebastian trusted him without measure. They worked in the same department, positions of almost equal importance. It was necessary for this friend, somewhere in the corridors of power, to hear that Sebastian is prophesied in the chief's promotion, so he is prepared. He was a noble man, his honesty was noble. Why not take it up a notch? But suddenly he was angry. Why Sebastian, not him, was being promoted? So he wrote a denunciation. Was a mere denunciation believed and imprisoned? Lucy was horrified. The time, Lucy, was such that for any sneeze in the direction of the revered portrait could be imprisoned or shot, and no one would even know about the shooting. How did you find out about it? This friend was never promoted anyway. In time, he bitterly regretted what he'd done. He didn't think that Sebastian would die here, and soon that man's wife was also taken on the workers' complaint. She was a doctor and of undesirable nationality, and his friend loved his wife. Childless, he was going crazy with loneliness, and his conscience must have tormented him too. He left the confession and trusted it to a trustworthy person, and then he took his own life. He knew his wife would never come back. What kind of man is he? Lucy was outraged. He took the life and happiness of so many people, and himself too. My husband is the same, and I'm sure he won't be happy either. What did he do? Is he the reason you're here? Camille asked. Because of him. Lucy sighed. If he had been a faithful man, honest, he would not have left me and my son without money. How did you decide to go to such a terrible place? You're an educated girl. You could work a little. You'd have enough for bread and potatoes. Lucy told the old woman her story without hiding or embellishing anything. At the end of the story, tears spurted from her eyes. Poor girl, said Camille, holding Lucy's head against her chest. You are a hero. Yes, for the sake of a beloved creature one would do anything. If only I could bring Sebastian back. But life is short. It's been many years since he died, and here I am, needy and lonely. Be strong, Lucy. Since then, Camille had been discreetly patronizing Lucy. So, kind, though seemingly stern, she was always making sure Lucy dried her clothes, tucking in better pieces of food in the dining room. She knew Lucy wasn't just making money, she was saving her son. Soon, a new cook arrived for their job, and Camille said a warm goodbye to everyone and departed for the town where she had a tiny room. A month later, an old woman suddenly came to Lucy's brigade again, waited until lunchtime, called her over to her, and, unnoticed by the others, showed her the corner of a puffy envelope. Here's the money, she said in a low voice. Lucy wanted to say something, but the old woman signally ordered her to be silent, quiet, and they killed for less. There are all sorts of people here, God forbid, and don't even think of refusing. I have no relatives. I'm going to die soon. They'll scatter like crows anyway, and you'll have a job to do. Go away, save your son and yourself. No one has ever taken good health away from here. How old do you think I am? 100 years old? I just turned 70. There was enough money to do 3 Mason surgeries. Lucy took the money and left. My son had the surgery, and he started walking. Restoring mobility was a long and difficult task, and it required a lot of money. It was only Camille's gift that made this miracle possible. Mason worked with the best physiotherapists, practiced physical therapy, and constantly strengthened his legs. And a year later, Lucy returned to the distant Tega town and took Camille to herself. The old woman cried, almost kissed her hands, saying that she had acquired a family. She had grown old, but she kept her activity and lively mind. So the 3 of them lived together. Camille worked hard in the vegetable garden, helped Lucy a lot around the house. It seemed there was no skill she didn't possess. Babs, Camille, where did you learn to do that? Mason wondered, munching crisply on her baked waddles. At Granny Clara's, and they're not so tasty. But don't tell her that, she'll be offended. Camille and Mason looked at each other conspiratorially and giggled. Both old women had a temper, but their age, their shared memories of the past, kept them close friends. They often posed on the bench, one big as a bear, the other small, dry gray knot on the top of her head. Nothing of Lucy's past life in the village, of course, was recognized. The old women were silent as partisans. Lucy made a pie in the morning. While she was making the paste, preparing the filling, the sun rose quite high. "I'll be ready in time for lunch," said Lucy, and began to heat the oven. At that time, a dog barked in the yard. Lucy came out and was stunned to see Daniel standing on the other side of the gate. He was smiling at his ex-wife as if nothing had happened. Following her mother and Mason went outside to see who it was. The dog didn't usually bark at his own, so it must be someone else. Lucy walked to the wicket gate, throwing to her son on the way. "Mason, get away from the sin." The son walked slowly toward the house. Lucy did not look in his direction. Her heart was tearing out of her chest. The hated man stood on the other side of the fence and smirked. He hadn't changed much even in those 10 years, only became, as if shallower, uncasey, and maybe now the ex-wife saw him with different eyes. "Why did you come?" Coldly, Lucy asked him. "Go where you came from. There's nothing of yours here." "I didn't come here to demand anything." The smile slowly fell off Daniel's face. "I came back to check on you. We're not strangers. What are you doing here?" "Your money's gone." "I took it all. I didn't even leave any money for my son's medicine." Daniel, of course, didn't expect a warm welcome, but it was the first time he'd seen Lucy so angry. He's her lawful husband. She could still behave more decently. He decided to take offense. "Why did you do that?" "But it turned out so. But I came back, and you're not happy." "Daniel, are you serious? After all these years, after what you did, you think you can just come back? I know you're single, so you were waiting. For you? Waiting?" Lucy even choked with indignation. How insolent is he? It disgusted her to look at his fat face. "What did I do?" "What? I ask you. You live happily, everything is fine, and then this is my house too. You a shoal." The woman barely restrained her anger not to attack her ex-husband with fists. "Go away." "What shared house? You stole the money that was prepared for the child's operation. You left us in a position we wouldn't wish on an enemy. You haven't paid a dime of child support. How can you even say that?" Suddenly, Lucy saw Mason standing next to her. He had a shotgun in his hand. The guy threw it down and aimed it at Daniel and said, "Go away, and don't ever come near our house." Daniel turned pale. but then pulled himself together, remained standing where he was. Then he swallowed and said through the force of it, "What are you threatening me?" "Not a fool to shoot, who will spoil his life young. Go away when adults are talking." Lucy, terrified, rushed between father and son, but Mason stepped around her and took aim again. Daniel, not noticing Mason's movements, stepped from foot to foot. He was pleased with himself. It wasn't the kind of reception he'd been expecting, of course, but he wouldn't just walk away. Not noticing the hatred of his wife and son looking at him from the other side of the fence, he said cheekily, "At least pay compensation for my half." Oh, he could use even a little money now. Miranda threw him out, as they say, without severance pay. Where's he going to go now? All he could do was to get his way, to squeeze some money out of these poor people. Daniel looked up and saw Lucy trying to take the gun away from Mason. To tell the truth, he was afraid that a stray bullet would fly out, and then all his dreams would be over. But then an old lady appeared next to Mason and Lucy, as if from under the ground. She gently took the gun from Mason's hands. "Don't do it, grandson. He's right. Why would you ruin your life? For something like this. You got everything to look forward to, but I got nothing to lose." And Camille very professionally dropped the double-barreled shotgun. Daniel, despite his fear, even laughed. What a scene! Her graying head barely sticking out of the ground, but she grabbed the gun with her bony hands instantly and pointed it at him. What a laugh! Daniel heard the old woman's creaky voice. "Do you know your name?" "Daniel Wright?" "Well, I was the best hunter in my time. No man could compare to me, and I wouldn't miss a boar like that." The first shot went in the air. Daniel jumped with surprise. His desperate fear came back to him. With a mocking smile, looking at him, Baba Camille said, "The second shot is usually at the knee." And she began to slowly lower the gun down. Daniel was gripped by panic. Such an iron button could put a bullet in his knee. He didn't remember how he shrieked all over the street, "I'm going to jail. I'll put you all in jail." He turned and ran, away from the Dan house. Then he stopped for a moment, turned around, shook his fist. Anything he might have expected, but not such a reception. But people, and you came to them with all your soul. As to your relatives, in fact, they are his closest people, and they... A shot rang out again, and a small fountain of pebbles and sand appeared under the man's feet. Daniel shrieked and ran. Turning down another street, he stopped to catch his breath. What to do now? Nothing good had come of his attempt. He would not be able to use his wife's services as he had done 10 years ago, and live happily in a free apartment. As he now called it on Miranda, his former home, his home too. The thought hit Daniel's brain like a red rag on an angry bull. "I will?" He repeated, again strengthening himself in his hatred for his ex, his wife and son. Knowing his goal, he walked confidently toward the police station, which was located where he had been in previous years. Before opening the doors of the police station, Daniel shook himself off, breathed and gathered his strength, and then he shook himself back to his former indignant state and stepped inside with determination. "Hello, who can I complain to here? I was just almost shot outside my own house." And the freckled boy in a police uniform, sitting behind the window of the duty officer, looked at him indifferently and lazily said, "Come on, there have never been any murders in our village. But come with me now, I'll show you who shoots at the feet of peaceful people and threatens to shoot them to death. Who attempted to kill you, citizen? The old woman's crazy. She belongs in a mental institution. She might shoot someone else. So what? Does she have the rifle?" The officer on duty asked with a sneer. a hunting rifle. And rest assured, she handles it like a pro. Daniel, at the memory of the accurate shots, was again seized by an unpleasant feeling of threat to his life. "Show me your papers as a citizen." Daniel took out a passport from his inside jacket pocket. "Ah, so you're Mason's absconding father?" the policeman asked. "I see a familiar face. I remembered you. You worked as an electrician when I was still in school." He didn't look happy to be recognized. Daniel was forced to write a statement, and at the duty officer's request, he rewrote it 5 times. There was even a suspicion whether it was done on purpose. But the freckles of the young officer on duty looked completely serious. So Daniel resigned himself to rewriting it. "We will take all measures, citizen of the victim." The policeman reported, for some reason, without calling Daniel by his surname. Did he dislike the surname or what? Daniel sighed and quietly went back to Abigail. Maybe his sister wouldn't say no to another sleepover while the police dealt with the assassination case. Daniel wasn't going to let it go. At least let them compensate him for the moral damage. They must have plenty of money. Lucy had built a house in his yard, by the way. Tomorrow morning he'll go back to the police station. He'll get what he wants. He should have threatened to go further, to the prosecutor, if anything. The police couldn't find any weapons, and they weren't looking for any. All the neighbors confirmed that they were outside at the time, and they didn't see anything like what Daniel wrote in his statement. He never showed up in Lucy and Mason's lives again.